Thank you. It is 7:03 and we are reconvening. Please join me for just a moment of silence. A council member lost somebody very special and I'd like to remember them. Thank you. And I'll call this meeting to order. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're in section 5, approval of minutes. 5.1, our special city council meeting minutes from December 2nd, 2019. 5.2, the special city council meeting minutes from December 6th, and the regular city council meeting minutes from December 10th. Is there a motion?
I will move to approve all 3 minutes as written, unless there are corrections that have not yet been noted.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
A second.
Thank you, Tawny. I did submit one edit. I don't know if other council members submitted any edits.
I had a bunch, but I didn't have time to submit them, so I think I may just abstain, or I don't know. What's the best way to do that? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining.
And abstaining. So 4-0 with one abstain. 6, mayor and council reports. We are tonight going to be going through our board assignments, and so just reminder that that's what this section of our meeting is all about, is reporting on what we've done since our last council meeting. I attended a Mill Creek Community Collaborative meeting. I hosted with Zachariah Levine of Grand County. He's the Economic Development Director. Moab's first investor speed dating event. Jim Sorensen with Sorensen Innovation Center came down. It was well attended, and it was a nice event to introduce projects to money. And I just want to give Caitlin Myers of the city a shout out for presenting our very own Walnut Lane project. I think that was great. And maybe, just maybe, we have found creative financing out of that event. I also attended a League of Cities and Towns board meeting and an LPC meeting. The league is gearing up for legislative session. I attended a USU Moab Advisory Council meeting. They are revising their membership and doing new member recruitment. I know that Mike has had interest in that in the past, and so he and I have talked about him taking that over, and he has said yes. But I did attend that meeting, and they are just focused this year on continued fundraising and programming. I don't know what that means. That's it for me, because I don't know what that meeting means, that note.
I don't have much.
Christmas.
I was at an EMS meeting, Special Service District meeting on Monday, and I know you guys like some factoids, yeah, read them and weep. Let's see, the year ended with a total call volume of 1,463 calls, which surpasses the previous year by 14%. Was an increase of 181 calls. And 2019 has been the busiest year by far in the history of EMS. But in 2018, we had 11% increase, so a 25% increase over 2 years. And Director Andy Smith noted that during their 2016 assessment of the department, they didn't predict hitting 1,400 calls until 2023. So this gives you some idea. Lots of EMT classes going on between high school students and public class. Just some of the things that we don't always know are going on with EMS is that we had a shift on January 1st. It was actually called by the hospital to see how many ambulances EMS had. So EMS actually went in and helped figure out how to get some really sick kids out of town because it wasn't possible to fly helicopters, and spent a lot of hours at the hospital helping with that, which is probably not stuff EMS gets reimbursed for, which, but again, I think we all agree is an important part of service to helping the community with public health issues. So there is more, but I guess I will leave it at that. I did miss a healthcare special service district meeting. I did have a death in the family over the holidays, so most of my time was spent with family. I think that's it, other than maybe Joel, when you get to your thing, I was just going to ask you if we settled on a date for strategic plan.
Thank you, Ronnie.
I went to a homeless committee meeting the other day and found out that, much to my regret, that Joel and Carly and whoever else may have been involved in an effort to try to provide housing at the gym city owns on cold winter nights has apparently come to an impasse because of regulations and rules and lack of fundings and so on and so forth. That's unfortunate, but I want to thank staff for at least making a stab at making that happen. Rest of it's all water related, in particular the city's water advisory board. I want to thank Carly once again for coming to that meeting and helping together with Kara Darwin about helping us all get better organized, basically. And we've had a tendency, for example, to argue amongst themselves and then say, oh, let's send a recommendation to city council to do this or that. And I've been trying to argue that it really needs to be more of an educational process. So to focus more on an annual report, keep that updated, use that as a vehicle to communicate recommendations, and then prepare presentations that the water board members should to provide to staff and to planning commission in particular. That way when a recommendation about gray water or rainwater comes down to you guys, you'll have their support, and everybody will better understand what's going on. So I want to thank Carly for helping make that happen.
Thank you, Mike.
I attended a housing authority meeting, and it was very short because everybody wanted to leave. The biggest takeaway was that the Moab Area Land Trust is moving forward with their infrastructure, and they were very excited about where they felt like they had gotten in a very short period of time relative to how development generally happens. And they have updates on their website. And I did take notes at that meeting, but for some reason through the holidays, I have no notes. And I cleaned house too.
Glass coaster.
And the Moab Arts Council asked me to sit in with on their meeting where they chose who their donations went to this year. And those choices are on their website. And it was a very interesting meeting. This is, I'm still a little bit confused. Is the money that the city grants to them, is that part of the Arts in Public Places money?
Yes.
Okay. They weren't sure and neither was I. So it was very interesting to see their decision-making process and how they eliminated some of those requests and how they granted other ones. But they were very young and very fun, and it was an enjoyable evening. And that was all I did.
Thanks, Tawny.
So there was a Mill Creek collaborative meeting that staff, the mayor, and myself attended. At this point in the process, it is honing down access points and signage for the more organized flow of usage in the recreation area, defining front country and back country zones, and discussion of getting ready for community outreach in the next month to share with the public where things are with projects and how they are going to be able to get involved. So you will see notification from us as a city and as the county as well. Attended a transit authority meeting after a couple months hiatus of meeting. The discussion of creating a formal board or keeping the group more along the lines of a think tank to offer suggestions and ideas was a big topic of discussion with the with Zachariah and Mary McGann and myself, and we outlined the direction and the priorities for 2020, such as shuttle infrastructure planning, working with planning and zoning code changes that are happening with our overnight accommodation, new design standards, and so that we can offer something to the statewide rural long-range plan that is being worked on with the county and the city and San Juan County with UDOT. Short-term and long-term strategies for transportation to Salt Lake City is also on our agenda for this year. I had an airport board meeting. We were introduced to our new airport board manager, Andy Solvsvig, who most recently worked in Eagle, Colorado. We sent, as a board, our letter of support to the county council to accept SkyWest bid as the airline operate at the airport for the next 3 years. As it stands, SkyWest will continue to operate flights to Denver 3 times a day in the season and 1 time a day in the winter, which is the end of October to February. SkyWest is looking to meet demand and fill its 50-passenger CRG regional jets. And from 2018 to the close of 2019, month-to-month comparisons, there was a 27% increase in flight loads. So,
But no flights to Salt Lake?
So no flights to Salt Lake, but I mean, and this is a perfect opportunity to have this, to briefly put this plug in. So SkyWest was the only one who came out to bid. So and the EAS contract is done through the Federal Department of
I
Transportation.
read the packet, but
Oh, you did?
January through March, it would be nice.
No, it would be really nice. But we're also at a standstill because Delta is that's their hub airline, and there's no gates. So if a gate was to open up, and SkyWest is very well aware of the fact that when they did have Salt Lake City before, it was financially beneficial to do that. So if it does come up, there's a possibility. I mean, it wasn't like, ooh, we don't want Salt Lake.
No.
'Cause we all want Salt Lake.
And I want to thank the airport for all they do, and it's not a dig at all, but man,
Oh, I know.
when the legislature's in,
It would be
it
really
would be
nice.
awesome.
It'd be really nice, yes. And quickly, good news, our local census group, we have been awarded $25,000 in a grant for our Complete Count Committee, and currently we are working on promotional materials and will be spreading the word across the community on the importance of filling out the census information. And as of today, it's 81 days to our National Census Day, and unless you live in Tuksook Bay, Alaska, and then you can fill it out on January 21st. So, more census info to come.
Do you want us to get a countdown clock? And
Oh my gosh,
City Hall?
yes, that'd be good. That's it?
Thanks, Karen.
I went to a travel council meeting, and it seems like at each one that I've been to, there's some talk about the role of recreational assets in the city as a draw for tourists, and it emphasizes to me that maybe at some point we'll have to do some sort of coordinated recreational asset prioritization. But we've got the capital improvements matrix now, so.
we've been working on that. We have a solid list going, and we're about ready to give that information over to you guys.
Right. And the Travel Council has been working on coordinating advertising in Western Colorado to promote the Dinosaur Diamond, which is this route between 4 paleontologically rich communities as a scenic drive to check out those assets. And then I just wanted to make you aware that the BLM is moving forward towards a oil and gas lease sale on a couple parcels up on Sand Flats, and that sale would happen this summer. So that might be kind of a big deal in the coming months.
Something that our Water Advisory Council would likely be good eyes for looking at that.
Yes.
Yeah, so Caitlin, if I may.
You may.
Ken Colm, the consultant that the city hired to do a report, in his opinion, most of the water that shows up at Moab Springs doesn't come really from behind the aquifer on the northeast side. Rather, it comes down from a set of fractures that run all the way along the east edge of the valley, and it's coming all the way down from the golf course, basically down towards the river. So that might be one thing, it might mitigate that. However, I don't want to go on record as saying I'm for the oil and gas stuff. It was pretty horrifying looking at the areas they want to drill in. It's right next door, kids.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for reporting that, Kaylin. Okay, real quickly, I remembered what my note was. Some of you know of the author Brad Lancaster. He wrote the book Drylands, Rainwater Harvesting in Drylands. He's from Tucson. He contacted me and is willing to come to Moab. And it would be on Wednesday, March 25th. It would be the day after our council meeting. I tentatively reserved this room at lunch and then also in the evening. We could look at noticing it and doing it as a council meeting. We could encourage staff to attend. So afternoon or evening would matter how we would want to set that up. But he is a true expert in gray water and green infrastructure. So it's exciting to have somebody like that willing to come to Moab to give a presentation. And I wanted to get from all of you a preference of how you'd like to utilize him here. So he could present to us as a council, or we could just do it as a open to the public and just utilize this space. How would you like to do it?
I'd be pleased to go.
As a council meeting or as a?
No, on my own, just as a member of the water board, if nothing else. You know.
So just organize the presentation here in the chambers?
Yeah, I think I'd like to engage as much of the community as possible, and because it's a lot more than us, and it'll really take the whole community to maximize that potential.
And evening?
Evening.
Okay, sounds good. I'll make that work. Okay, that was all for me. Joel?
So our strategic planning date is Valentine's Day, February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone.
Love for the city.
But it's on a Friday and it's during the normal workday. So in the years past, we've done it on a Saturday and we're going to do it on a Friday this year to try and make it so more staff is available, and that way if we have questions and issues, we can address them right on spot. So that's the main reason for moving it to a Friday from a Saturday. The widening is still on course.
I'm sorry, and is everybody okay with that date?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
I have a slight problem, but I can talk to you later. I have a
Okay.
memorial to go to, so.
Okay. And I thought that had gotten sent out. I thought everyone had received that update. Is that not the case?
I received it.
I got it.
So he asked me stuff like that and I panic. I'm like, oh no. The widening is on the same path as it was for end of February to begin. I know that an email the mayor had sent out last week, and she had talked to the UDOT division leader for us, and that they had talked about bumping it back to October, but as we continue to meet with UDOT and talk about how that would actually impact us and the changes that would make for businesses, and that they had been supplying with the widening in mind, and that would actually impact 2 seasons if we did it that way, and we preferred to keep it in February and keep pushing through for this February, and so that is back on for February, and we're gonna keep going that route.
And is the city going to put out an informational?
We have been posting stuff on our webpage, correct? Okay, so we met about that last week, and we talked about getting information out. Now, I think the Monty information came out that made it look like it may be October, and so we held back for a minute to make sure we could get it all narrowed back down, because we didn't want to put out bad information, but yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
so somewhere besides the website, that would be, okay.
Do we want to generate our website for just that project? I mean, UDOT will generate a website just for that project, but do we want to as well?
Information needs to go out to businesses
Yeah.
as to when it's starting, because.
Well, and that's what we had heard from businesses, council member, is that they had already ordered supplies for the coming season, their stock for the coming season, and they had ordered less because they felt like with the widening that they were going to have a little bit of a less crowd than they had in years past. And so if we were extending it to October, they wanted to know that now because they wanted to order back up. And so we had to really scramble to get the determination as to what we were doing.
Yeah.
So.
People asked about it at the travel council meeting, so I think
Yeah.
getting that information out there.
Yep, and that's why I'm trying to make this announcement
Okay,
here
so
tonight.
when, and, because I'll give it to the chamber, because they've also asked about it too, so.
What would be easier for us, like, could we utilize Facebook, or do you think that
We will
that would not
utilize that
be
as well,
as
but we'll send,
effective,
we
not
can
as
email
effective
list it
in
as well.
getting the
I mean, I
information
think
out?
lots of people use, I don't
What is the,
touch that.
Lisa, what was is the date the 24th now? Is that what we're hearing?
Yes, well,
Yeah. Yeah, it was 17 3 weeks ago, and now they're telling us the 24th of February.
as of a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And we'll be putting it out on all of our social media as well as the website, and I do have a list of the interested business owners that we met with like well over a year ago, that I'll be sending all that out to.
Oh, great.
Directly.
Great, that's perfect, thank you.
Yep.
And then if anybody wanted to be on that list, whether they're a business or they just want to be on a list of getting up-to-date UDOT information emailed, can they?
They can contact me, but
They
they
can-
can also sign up with UDOT and.
So they can sign up with
Yeah.
UDOT,
Well, but I'm happy to have them.
and they
Yeah,
can
U-
sign up with.
UDOT will create a webpage for the project, and they'll also have an email list, but if they want to just email the city's general email, then we can add them to any email file we
So
have.
does UDOT, like, will they do an ad in the papers? Is that how that, do you know?
I don't know if they'll do an ad in the paper. I don't know about that. I can find out. I mean, that's
Okay,
not a problem.
okay.
But what we experienced with the last communication moment was that more from us is going to be important, even if it's just reiterating what they're posting in certain sites too, right?
Yep.
So, thanks, Lisa.
And then I have met with you guys. I have been working to meet with you guys and get some direction from you, and so we'll get the RAP and the impact fee analysis and everything going this week, and that's kind of was waiting until I met with you guys this last week. So, Oscar Antillon, our Public Works Department Director, he resigned. He moved back to Monterey, California, to where his family is located, and he's no longer with the city, and we wanted to thank him and wish him the best and welcome him back if he'd like to come back. But nonetheless, we do want to thank him. He has awesome leadership while he was here, and just mind-blowing with his experience and what he brought to Public Works Department, and how things shifted quickly with him being there, and we appreciate him and want to tell him publicly thank you. In the interim, I will be acting as Public Works Director, and so if you have any issues there, then please contact me. The winter shelter is still in process. I don't want to deem it dead by no means. We worked out all of the permitting and requirements from the state. That's pretty much all good to go. We were in the process of still working through funding for finance parts of it and volunteers, is my understanding. So it's obviously not looking like we're going to get it done this year, but I definitely don't want to deem it dead. We have it all figured out as to how it basically can work. We just got to figure out guidelines and volunteers and how to finance some bedding and stuff like that. So
Thank you.
we're definitely working on it still, though. It's not looking like this year, but it's definitely not a dead project by no means. So, and then if Mr. Williams, the city engineer, would like to come up, he's going to give you an update on some transportation information outside of the UDOT stuff that I brought up. And after that, we'll give the time back to you guys and go from there.
Thank you, Joel.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I want to give you a few project updates that we're involved with. One is you alluded to the regional transportation plan between the city, the county, UDOT, and San Juan County, and we had a phone call this week. We have a consultant selected. We're hopeful that within 2 to 3 weeks, the consultant will be on board. It's a maximum of a 1-year project per the scope. So I expect them to start pretty quick, and there'll be stakeholder groups and public involvement. And I just want to report that's moving forward. Also, we received a UDOT grant through their technical assistance planning to do what I'm going to call as a unified plan, but certainly council should name that baby. It's a joint plan with Grand County for updating a transportation master plan. As staff, we just call it unified because what we're going to do is Grand County is putting in 20,000, we're putting in 15,000. UDOT's putting in the rest of the money. We will, the city and county will manage the project in coordination with UDOT, and it's really going to be the city and county's plan. And the purpose for that, of course, is it'll build upon the regional plan with UDOT, which is going to focus primarily on their roads, and we have some projects in there as well. But also, the unified plan will be focused on city and county transportation issues, and the connectivity with the state, will have been established in many regards. I can give you an even more updated report on the Highway 191 widening. I got off the phone 6 o'clock. They opened bids today, and the bids came in greater than 10% above the engineer's estimate, which by UDOT rules means they have to reevaluate. That could mean, but I expect that they'll be making a decision by the end of next week. Could be they just find some more money and move forward, or I don't know. They have a very rigid process, so that's all that I really know, but just wanted to let you know that if they find the more money, they think that could happen as early as the end of next week, in which case it might not be February 24th, but I would expect it to not be much later than that. That's what I was told. So the other projects, real quick, are the North Sewer Trunk Line is moving along. We're close to being on schedule, pretty close, and holiday has slowed it down a little bit, but we expect it to be completed in April. And then the Mill Creek Water Line Design Project is 90% complete, and we hope to have plans within about 6 weeks and cost estimates that'll fit into the capital improvement matrix. So, unless there's any questions, that was my brief update.
That's it, Mayor. And Chief wasn't able to
Okay.
make it tonight, so we're good to go.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chuck. Thanks, Joel. We are now at Section 8, Citizens to be Heard. It's probably good to mention that there's no public hearing for tonight. And typically, we put all of the comments that the community would like to make on any particular agenda item here at this time. So if you would like to be heard about anything, or whether it's on or not on the agenda, please fill out one of these blue forms, and it's the Citizens to be Heard form. So, and we do ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Sarah Melnikoff. Thank you.
Although I'd like to be brief. Hi, I hope you're all doing well. Before I start what I was going to talk about, I wanted to clarify, because Mike was at the homeless coordinating meeting. I tried to make it clear that the city bent over backwards to help us, and it was our failing because we had lack of funding to hire proper staff. So we've been very careful to put everyone up that we can find, who we can put up.
Yeah, and my point of view is where we've figured out permitting and everything from the state's point of view, like, we're still willing to proceed. So I don't want the word to get out that it's dead, because
I know, you guys
next
are
year,
doing-
if we have the money and we can get the volunteers, then we're still
Maybe
still
there's
on
a
board.
chance for this year. We
Yep,
don't know.
absolutely.
So no, the city was amazing with that. Before I could even finish asking Joel, he was saying yes. So I like that. You should do it for everything I ask. I know you guys are looking at the community contributions. I just want to give a quick report on my fundraising for my emergency needs fund. For 24 days, we stood at City Market with 60 different volunteers. A couple of nonprofits we help a lot, Multicultural, they took shifts for a whole day, Sea Haven for a whole day, Larson and Company for most of the day, and Usara. So we had a wide range of community members helping. And at City Market, we raised $11,180. And then with some private donations, we have about 23. And if we get the city donation, we'll be close to 25. However, last month, I spent $4,056. That's a double what I need to spend. And $2,200 of it was on lodging or rent. This month, to date, I've spent $3,190. I try to keep it at 2, and a lot of that is rent and lodging, keeping people in their housing or putting people up. So, yeah, $25.73 on lodging and rent so far this month, and it's only the 14th. I had calls all day the other day. Anyway, we're happy to do it, and we want to help people. There's a lot of need, and just like EMS and other things, this is probably the busiest December we ever had. So hopefully that'll change. Oh, I only have 32 seconds. I don't know if you all noticed, but I've been promoting the Community Recycle Center for 20 years this month. And I'm continuing to do it. I put ads in about opting out of single stream and trying to let people know what our research shows about it so people can decide for themselves. And hopefully one day we can all work together to have a very healthy recycling system. Right, John? Yes.
Sounds great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Ricky Epperson.
Good evening. I'm Ricky Epperson. I'm the Executive Director of Community Rebuilds, and I'm here to just clarify a few things about the Ordinance 2020-02 that'll be coming up later in the agenda. I think there's a couple of concerns that I'm hearing. One is commercial creep, and the other one is the Rancho Fandango turning back into a nightly rental. We feel that we've addressed both of these concerns in our plan. Nothing in the neighborhood will change, aside from one more house will be in the housing stock when we get the new office built. We already have an office on the property. It's just tucked back and nestled into a very residentially zone. In fact, to start by addressing commercial creep, in the last year as we've occupied this space, it feels really commercial creepy, actually, to have our office back there. And, you know, we don't really have much office traffic, probably like 5 people a week, but aside from the Vistas and program staff that work there. But it's really hard for the applicants to find us back there. And I feel like we're disrupting the neighborhood more right now, being tucked back in there, and people have knocked on neighbors' doors, so, or the ranch doors too. That happens a lot. So it makes a lot of sense, of course, for us, but I feel for the neighborhood and for the city. So that, I think that addresses commercial creep. It is also increasing the commercial zoning by 29% and decreasing the residential zoning for the Moab City with this swap by 29%. So that feels really good. And then as far as nightly rentals, as long as I'm around, and many young people after me, you know, we'll be running our program hopefully forever. But we do have, you know, a dorm-style house and the Rancho Fandango that is now housing Vistas and YGP interns and things. And so I can understand why people wouldn't really want a nightly rental there. We definitely don't want nightly rentals there ever. We always want to preserve workforce housing, walkable housing. So we are going to deed restrict both properties regardless, and we're excited to do that. But it just makes sense for our office to be up front, tucked by the one commercial property that's acting as a commercial property, the Calico Cheetah. So our little office will be there, hopefully, and then all the residential will be preserved, because if where our current office is, even if we are to build another office on that back flag lot property, it's going to be completely surrounded by houses, and that just feels really weird. So it just makes a lot of sense, and I feel very confident that it won't impact the neighborhood any more than it has. So thank you.
Thank you, Ricky. Kenny Fallon.
Hi, I am an AmeriCorps VISTA at Community Rebuilds, and I would just want to speak as Vista. A lot of my friends have had trouble finding housing. They're in houses now, but there's just it's very difficult to find affordable housing, much less if you're on like this volunteer-oriented or like community internship or things like that, different service organizations. And so I'm grateful that I was able to get into housing that's reserved for service organization workers, and I'm hopeful that the zone change will go through because it'll just increase that supply and help more people that work at places like Youth Garden Project, Community Rebuilds, and the Free Health Clinic and other organizations that rely on AmeriCorps VISTAs and other interns to keep going strong. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenny. Zachariah Levine?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Zachariah Levine, of course, you all know me as the county's Community and Economic Development Director. Tonight, however, I am addressing you as the owner of 176 South, 200 East. I share a property boundary with one part of the subject acreage. And I'm just coming here to communicate to you that I have no objections to the requested zone change. In this instance, I actually think that it is beneficial to reverse the zoning designations of the subject acreage. I think that it makes sense to have the commercial parcel having more frontage on a public road rather than being on the flag lot portion of the acreage. As far as I'm concerned, as the adjacent landowner, I would prefer to have the R3 zone designation on the rear lot line on that flag lot portion because it fits with the character of that area more so than a commercial zone designation. And, you know, as a community member, I certainly support the endeavors of this landowner and Community Rebuilds as an organization and the mission that it is working to, and the mission and the goals that it's working to reach. So pretty straightforward, no objections to the zone change.
Thank you, Zachariah. Kimberly Pettit? Welcome.
I'm speaking about the community rebuilds zone change. Very uncomfortable doing so. I have previously sent the members of council and the mayor a booklet regarding my understanding of this issue. Then this evening, I wrote this email right before I came, which was, I was alerted by Diane Walker, a neighbor, at 4:51 p.m. today that there was this meeting. So I wrote this and I've sent it to the council, whatever it is. But since I was under the impression that this was supposed to, before this was to be considered by the council, that it was supposed to be, it was sent forth from the building commission or whatever they are, that they approved it, but that they would only pass it on, 4 members passed it forward to say that they would have the council have a public hearing before they made a decision. But apparently that's not the case. So, council members at all, I hope this transmission reaches all. I'm currently trying to calm my nerves so I might collect my thoughts and convey the briefest comment regarding the matter of the zone swap request for community rebuilds. Uniquely qualified to weigh in on this request by community rebuilds to reassemble their campus in the Block 8 Moab town sites, specifically parcel B08-0008, Fandango R3 zone, and parcel B08-0003, the Burns Trust C2 zone. Not only as the property owner directly across the street, parcel B09-004, previously the Dreamkeeper Inn B&B, but as the property owner of two separate properties for taking. Commercial property at 550 North Main, the old Moab Realty and Chili Pepper Bikes, which is related to the widening that you were just discussing, and 141 Arches Drive, an adjudicated taking that resulted in the retention dam at Arches Drive. After the New Year holiday, I made a personal inquiry to the city offices and found no posted agenda for this January 14th council meeting. I specifically went to the council chambers and found nothing. Well, I did read the postings around the hallway information table that suggested I could find all meetings and agendas posted at moabcity.org. So I did that and nothing. On Thursday, January 9th, 2020, I read the notices in the Times Independent and saw nothing. No notice of a public hearing or even an upcoming meeting. Going back 1 month to the Planning Commission public hearing on Ordinance 2020-02, Community Rebuilds Request, located directly across the street from the requested zone swap, I was not made aware of the public hearing or interview by anyone wishing to convey a narrative to support such a zone change. The Community Rebuilds did not post any notice until 3 days before, and they simply placed a poster up against their sign, the Community Rebuild sign, pinned down from blowing away by a large boulder. In addition, the day of the meeting, after I delivered documentation concerning the matter to Council, Mayor, and Planning Commission, did I receive a response from Nora Shepherd that included paper-clipped documents that I will forward to you as soon as I finish this brief. I tried to do it, but I can't. I have an old computer and I can't send it. The list of attachments includes number 3, document approving the proposed zoning map amendment when it was only supposed to be a public hearing. So also, I will forward the email sent from Ronnie Desario, in the aftermath of the Planning Commission public hearing that she graciously sent to me this afternoon. Again, I couldn't send it, but it was in reference. The email was after the Planning Commission meeting, and reading the thing that Nora sent, that was a document that said it was approved, and it just needed the mayor's signing.
Kim, I just need to tell you that you are a minute past what is allowable,
one
but
paragraph more.
I'm gonna allow you to finish, but I wanted
you.
to let you know that that's where you were.
The minutes of the Planning Commission meeting on December 12, 2019, public hearing on Ordinance 2020-02, reports that the commission of 4 members only would move to proceed on the matter by passing the ordinance only with the understanding that the council would not pass it until they held a public hearing. Tonight is a democratic debate. There's been no notice. Please table this matter. Kimberly Pettit.
Thank you. Dennis Silva? Welcome.
Thanks, Emily. My name's Dennis Silva, and I want to...
Oh, you're electric.
I'm not a member of the city. I live in the county, but I've been communicating with council members and fellow bird club enthusiasts about contributions to the Humane Society for their trap and neuter program. And I really think that birds should be considered in your decision on how to suggest to them that the trap and neuter program be modified somewhat to reduce those cat colonies to eventually none, and we could get rid of the trap and neuter program, because regardless of how we keep those feral cats in place, they kill birds all the time, whether they're fed or not. And so I recognize how important the Humane Society's service is to our city and to our community. I mean, we have a problem with cats and people letting them go, and we have to deal with it some way. And right now it feels like a nonprofit has taken the ball and run with it without much guidance. And there's lots of documentation that support the fact that the trap, neuter, release program kills lots of birds, especially songbirds that are threatened. And I think as a community, we're trying to do lots of things to save our environment, and I think birds are part of that. But feral cats are not. You know, they're something that give us comfort personally, but they don't necessarily contribute to the health of our environment. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Ellen Musso. Did I pronounce it correctly? Amuso.
Hi,
Welcome.
how are you all? My name is Ellen Musso. I'm a board member on the Humane Society. I also volunteer time with the feral cat colonies in town, several of them in town. And I'm here to just read a statement from the Humane Society regarding the issue that the gentleman spoke of. Obviously, in a perfect world, there would be no feral cats. In a perfect world, most pets would probably be sterilized. And in a perfect world, unwanted animals would not be turned out to fend for themselves. As you know, feral cats do not belong to the Humane Society of Moab Valley. They are unowned community cats abandoned by their former owners. We stepped in more than 15 years ago because neither the city nor the county were addressing the escalating issue. And statistics from the Moab City shelter showed that city euthanized almost 2,000 cats between 1997 and 2004 at taxpayer expenses. In addition to paying salary for animal control to set up traps, recover trapped cats, and transport them first for euthanization and then to the dump for disposal before our program was even implemented. Our community feral cat program has successfully stopped the runaway feral cat population and reduced Moab's animal shelter costs. The community cat population has not only stabilized, but it has been steadily declining in our response to the program. Our program works, and in 2016, there were 186 community cats in the program. Currently, there are 105. In 4 years, the community cat population has decreased by 82 cats, which is around 44%. Suggesting that our program be abandoned and misidentifies the real issue. The core issue here is really the residents turning cats out to fend for themselves when they move or have unwanted litters. Until this is remedied, we will always have feral cats, and it will always cost money to address the problem. The mission of the Humane Society of Moab Valley is to provide education for the humane treatment of animals, provide the community with a low-cost spay and neuter program, and to provide safe shelter for animals. These three responsibilities strengthen our community and directly addresses all aspects of the feral cat issue.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens that would like to be heard this evening? I do not have any other forms. I want to, oh, okay. Summer, would you like to see it first, or just take it, or shall I take it? Okay. Welcome, Diane.
Thanks. I just sent a letter to the city council today, or Bob and I did, concerning this proposed zone change swap on 2nd East. And I just wanted to state verbally, I didn't realize so many people would be speaking out about it tonight. I didn't know it was going to be like that. But anyway, I thought I had to say that we are opposed to this zone change. We've lived at our residence on First South, which is just about a half a block away from this property, for over 30 years. And we've been involved through the years in a lot of zone change issues in the Old Town
neighborhoods of Moab, you know, our general vicinity, I would say, you know, the old plot of Old Town. Anyway, there's a little bit of a history that goes on with this area, you know, the Cali Cachita. When we first moved to our home, which was in 1987, it was actually zoned R3. And then in 1994, the owner of that house, it was just a house then, applied for a C2 zone change. And after, you know, hearings and petitions and, you know, went to the city council, and it was turned down. And the next year, the planning commissioner, the city came up with the C1 zone, and that owner applied for the C1 zone in 1995. The C2 zone was in 94, the C1 zone was in 95. And after a lot of issues with the neighbors and, you know, people finding out what was really going on, the person actually really wanted to sell that property, get a commercial zone change. It was passed as a C1 zone. And then just a few years ago, I don't know, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago, I was out of town. Bob and I were in California at the time, but it came up before the city. I guess it was the city's idea to apply for a zone change on the Cali Cachita for a C2. And this was just a couple years ago. And we weren't in town. I wasn't involved in that at all. But anyway, it wound up becoming a C2. So when people talk about this, it's like they sound like that corner was the beginning. It was always a commercial zone. It was not always a commercial zone. And I just take issue with the fact that the next door piece of property is now coming up for a commercial zone change when it's always been R3. And from what I understood, that it had lost its license to be overnight rental because it had lapsed. So yeah, it's actually back in the market as being a residential facility. So anyway, I just want to say that we are very much opposed to this zone change proposal, this swap. And we think it's poor precedent for the city. You know, we worry that this type of thing would be coming up again. And I just wanted to verbally state it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane. Okay, any other citizens to be heard? It's hard making comments, so thank you all for your confidence and bravery in doing so. We are going to move right along to, just a sec, proclamations. So it is my pleasure to read today the City of Moab's Martin Luther King Jr. Day Proclamation. To give us all a break. Whereas Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. made significant and long-lasting contributions to the social and economic process within our nation through the movement toward racial equality and civil rights for all people, no matter their race, color, creed, or occupation, including the push to desegregate public and private institutions and to provide fair rights and appropriate labor laws. And whereas through peaceful protests and nonviolent public demonstrations, Dr. King was a catalyst for change in how African Americans are treated and stated that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And whereas to commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. King on November 2nd, 1983, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill to declare Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a federal holiday to be observed annually on the third Monday of January to represent Dr. King's birthday. And whereas Moab City recognizes and honors the contributions made by Dr. King and pledges to promote universal respect for and observance of Martin Luther King Jr. Day and the civil rights guaranteed to all residents throughout Moab and our nation. And whereas as we honor Dr. King this month, which would have been Dr. King's 90th birthday, it is appropriate for us to recognize and pay tribute to his inclusive civil rights work for all communities. Therefore, be it resolved that I, Emily S. Niehaus, Mayor of the City of Moab, do hereby join with the community members in proclaiming Monday, January 20th, 2020, as Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And urge community and faith leaders, civil rights advocates, educators, public officials, and all people of Moab City to recognize and remember Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his dream for a greater America. We're now at section 10, old business. 10.1, community contributions recommendations for fiscal year 2019-2020.
Coordinated our outfits today.
Thank you. Solid blue.
Just for you.
Are you here for answering questions?
Yes.
That the council may have? So I'm going to go ahead and open this up for conversation or discussion, and at any point I welcome a motion.
Well, I will try this, and I have several people to credit with suggesting this sort of thing. But I will move that we fund the Humane Society as the committee has suggested, with the caveat that in subsequent years, any funding request from the Humane Society should show significant reductions in the feral cat population.
Thank you for that motion. Is there a second to that motion?
I would second.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Discussion. There are other items on the contribution list that need to be approved. I'm comfortable with isolating that as a motion. If you all are, I would still need a motion for the remaining contribution items on the list. But maybe we're going through motion, item by motion by item, so. Any discussion? I'll call for the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Again, before moving on, I would just welcome another motion to complete the contributions.
Mayor, can you turn that television?
Oh, sure, sorry.
I move to approve the Community Contributions Ad Hoc Committee's recommendations for the rest of the fiscal year 2019-2020 grants.
I'll second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you, Tani. Discussion?
So that is a motion for, just to reiterate, approve the rest of this as it is?
That's my understanding.
Yes.
I guess my only issue with that is in our last meeting, there seemed to be some desire to discuss the youth garden project, and I didn't know if anybody had wanted to revisit that. It did seem like in our last meeting there was interest in revisiting that.
I have a suggestion of moving some funds from KZMU to give to the youth garden, but I don't know if anybody's interested in possibly looking at doing that.
I could call for a vote, and based on how people vote, we would know if you would like that. Or do you want more discussion?
Well, then, and also there's the, can we scroll down just a little further? The, further, Wabi Sabi, there is the Utah Humanities Salt Lake group that is coming down to offer a workshop for doing grant funding for nonprofits, and that's also another opportunity to potentially, they're trying to help the community out, and there's $3,000 that's being offered from Wabi Sabi, which I think could be allocated as well. I don't know where people are. I feel like it's a double down on the nonprofit grant funding resource.
Does anybody else wish to discuss this before I call for the vote?
Would anyone entertain taking any more money out of the fund for groups that's currently allotted for events?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just going back to look at the numbers.
I think there's 14,500 left over for events.
Yes. And I know that it was budgeted, but with current discussions, I mean, I'm looking at potentially staying in budget with what has already been brought forward and not add more money into the pot.
Can you just restate your numbers? I got confused in there.
If we are looking at, I mean, I think the youth garden project, the day camp in the summertime is super viable. And I would like to give them $1,500. So if we could take $1,000 from Wabi Sabi and $500 from KZMU, that is something that I would entertain doing.
I'd be okay with that. Instead of a substitute motion, how about I call for the vote and we see if it dies or if it passes? All those in favor?
Aye.
What are we voting on?
Well, we are voting for, no, I'm sorry, let me be very clear. The motion that is on the table is to approve this as is with none of Karen's revisions. So all those in favor of the motion, which is to fund all things as they are stated on this list, say aye.
Point of question.
So it's aye or nay. Okay, opposed?
Do we say aye to
No.
opposition? Nay. Yay? Aye. Yes.
No. Point of order.
Is that a nay?
My previous motion is still on the floor, and has it been voted on or not? Are we voting?
Your previous motion was voted on and passed.
Yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Your previous motion was voted on and passed.
No, I thought it was. Okay, I just wasn't sure. Because it sounded like Kalen's. Yeah, okay. Very good, thank you.
Can I clarify, was that an aye or a nay from you for that, for funding the list as is?
That is an aye.
You are in favor of that? And Ronnie, I did not hear if you were at nay. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, it was a no.
A no.
Yeah.
Okay. So that motion failed 4-1. And I would entertain a new motion from you, Karen.
So I make a motion to, oh my gosh, can I
Just take
look
a
at
sec,
it?
just take a
Okay.
sec.
Can I?
Breathe.
That'd be great.
Yeah. And I'll just kind of talk to Mike really quickly. So your motion that you passed.
I understand that.
Just for the,
Okay, so we are right.
that pass.
I understand.
So it's the
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
of
I
it.
get that.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
No worries, I think
you had it, though.
yeah.
I move to approve the Community Contributions Ad Hoc Committee's recommendation for 2019-20 grants with the deletion of $1,000 from Wabi Sabi, $500 from KZMU to be granted to the Youth Garden Project at an amount of $1,500 for MRAC memberships.
I think you mean for the summer camps.
Is that the, oh, I'm sorry, yes, for the summer camps. So $1,500 would go to the Youth Garden Project summer camps.
Is that a clear motion for you, Summer?
She is mud.
Yeah, great.
I will second that.
Thank you, Tani, for your second discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Great. Moving along to 10-2, ordinance 2019-30, an ordinance amending the City of Moab Municipal Code, Section 17.31, RC Resort Commercial Zone, to allow new hotels and motels subject to revised development standards. I do want to make a point that this is discussion only, that we're not making any decisions tonight. And that is how it is noticed. Nora, is Corey joining?
If he wants to.
I don't know that he's here.
He may step down, which is fine.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
I am to understand we have like roughly a 10-minute presentation from you of where we be.
Yeah. All right. It's thinking.
Did you do the dongle button? There you go.
Yay. Okay.
Just an opportunity to say that in 2020.
Dongle.
All right. Wow, this is really working. So it's been a while since we sat down and chatted about overnight accommodations. I hope you all enjoyed the little break. My brain definitely enjoyed it a little bit. But we have been doing a fair amount of work behind the scenes. What I wanted to go over briefly was what is in your packet, what's changed, and then we provided some additional information to you that you've been requesting. Talk a little bit about the county action and what that action looked like. And then we're really looking for some direction from the council. After the last council meeting, we got a number of different inquiries and comments and questions from various council members that were pretty wide-ranging. And it makes me, I just want to make sure that we're going on a track that you all are comfortable with, because it seems like there's some people, there's some different thoughts coming in, which is great always, but I want to make sure we're headed the right direction. So I'm looking for some policy. The Planning Commission has not yet made a recommendation. It was scheduled for recommendation at their meeting last week, which didn't happen because we didn't have a quorum. And so we're having just a discussion tonight. Hopefully we'll talk about it again at the next Planning Commission meeting on the 23rd. And hopefully they will forward a recommendation or follow whatever direction you all are interested in going. So where are we in the process? As I mentioned, we've been working together to develop these development standards in order to better control, to get a better outcome for new hotels and motels in the recreation commercial zone. And we started this effort, well, actually it started about a year ago. And our charge was to include development standards on energy efficiency, density and scale, aesthetics, landscape buffering, mixed-use requirements, water carrying capacity, and contribution to cumulative traffic connectivity and non-motorized micro-vehicle transportation network. A number of the code provisions that what's in your packet reflects many of the comments that I received after the last city council meeting. And the draft also points out that where we differ from the county in the document that the county approved. The document in your packet says draft, but it is in fact the final draft that was voted on by the county council, just so you're aware of that. And I have noted in the development standards where there's a difference between what the county is proposing and what our ordinance proposes. The primary difference being, if this would load, the primary difference being the use of overlays versus no overlays. Our planning commission gave direction, and at one point the city council agreed that we wanted to change the zoning itself because then it's in black and white and everybody in the zone is subject to the same regulations. The county has always chosen to do an overlay zone, which means there's an extra legislative step. Somebody has to have the property actually designated for, have the overlay actually applied to the property. And they did work a little bit on the findings that they have to make in order to make that change and apply the overlay to a property. As drafted, we don't have that. That can be talked about if you wish. The county also approved, they approved a number of different overlays based upon use. So they have different campgrounds, RV parks, condominiums that are overnight rentals, all have different development standards. At this point in time, all we're trying to get is hotels and motels in the RC zone, to be followed afterwards, I hope, by looking at the C1 and C2 zones. The character of those nightly rentals, I think, would generally be pretty different, and so we'd need to write different development standards for those two zones. So I have attached is the county adopted version, and then our proposed version, which we can go over in a little bit more detail. In addition, we did this exercise, which hopefully is helpful. We did an analysis of the parcels that are undeveloped in that northern corridor. So this one is Grand County, so and it's doubtful that it's owned by Grand County and it's all pretty steep, so I don't anticipate that that's a development parcel. This parcel is owned by Moab Tramway. They actually have a pre-annexation and annexation agreement with us, which pretty much limits the uses that are on this parcel. There is another parcel here that we anticipate probably would receive some kind of an application, perhaps for overnight accommodations. Not a lot of this parcel is really developable. There is a fair amount of it, which is steep, and so it would just be along the frontage, really, where there's a flat area. You have to go up, and then there's a flatter area. This is existing RV, Moab Valley RV and Camp Park. This parcel is 3.65 acres. This one is 3.76 acres. And this one is 1.52 acres. And then this is the archway in its little parcel. And its parcel is 1.5, I'm sorry, this is 3.6. So this is 1.52 acres, and you can see how much of the parcel it fills. It pretty much maxes out the site. So based upon that information, I added a development standard that said the minimum lot size for a hotel motel use has to be 2 acres, so that these parcels cannot be subdivided and have one motel each. If they want to do a hotel or a motel, it has to be over 2 acres, unless they already have a small parcel. And really, there's this little piece, which is probably not Casa de los Amigos, 1.52 acres. It's kind of a tough one. This is where Moab, my place, is about to start construction. In fact, we issued their building permit last week. This is the Palladium Foundation, which is the old water park. And that, it's my understanding that that's in a conservation easement or some kind of protective covenant.
It is.
This is the World Mark site. This is the Element site. So those are both that were on our pending list that are moving forward. There's a little restaurant here, the Atomic, and then Western River Expeditions. Then there's this little piece, which doesn't seem to have any access from anywhere. So I checked with Moab Springs Ranch. They have not granted access to this piece, nor do they think they have to, and it doesn't go all the way down to the highway. So it appears to really not have any legal access at this point in time. If anybody else knows more about that parcel, that would be great. So if you consider that this could be, how many rooms is Archway?
60, Archway is 97 rooms.
97 rooms. So theoretically, you could put one of those there. You could put one of these here, except for that it's larger than the square footage that we're talking about. So I think you could assume on each of those, maybe maximum of, the base maximum is 40,000 square feet per parcel, or 40 rooms. So the 3 of those combined would be 120 rooms, potentially. I have no idea what's going to go on here. There could be an overnight accommodation and commercial on this piece of property. So that potentially could be a hotel and commercial.
So Nora, I apologize, but the 1.52 acres owned by Casa de Amigos, that cannot be a hotel, is that correct? According to your standards of being under 2 acres, or?
This one?
Yes.
If it's an existing lot of record that is less than 2 acres, then they would be able to go ahead and apply.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because it's an existing recorded lot.
Gotcha.
But this would prevent these from being subdivided for motels, anyway.
It would prevent them from becoming 2 40,000
Right,
square
okay.
foot properties.
Right.
So the second lot of a little less than 4 acres could be subdivided, could it not?
No. Because you have to have
You have
2 acres as a minimum for a hotel or motel. So if it's 3.57 acres, they can't split it because it wouldn't be 2 acres each. It would be have to be over 4 acres in order to split.
So did you consider just doing the developable area, floor area scale with the lot size, as opposed to just having these absolute maximums that, so say, rather than saying you have an absolute maximum and then you have an absolute minimum lot size, and then it's kind of open other than that, saying you can develop 0.3 square feet per developable square feet of lot.
0.3.
Square feet of floor area. And that way it just scales with the lot size.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that, but that's something that you could certainly chat about if you wish. The other thing we have is
Can I ask you to clarify, because
yeah, I'm a little confused.
I don't understand what you're saying.
So right now what's proposed is that there's this absolute size of 40,000 square feet or 60 per lot, regardless of the lot size, as long as it's bigger than 2 acres, which creates an incentive to subdivide lots greater than 4 acres into 2 lots and do 2 developments. But
there's only one of those parcels, and that's that one.
But there's parcels that could be redeveloped.
There are, and we have not dealt with that.
Yes. And then there's also a parcel that is there's potentially parcels of record that are smaller than 2 acres, but are still given the full allotment of developable area. They can develop 40,000 or 60,000 square feet, even though they're smaller than these other lots that are bigger. So
You could include a rule that, Nora, I mean,
We could.
suggestion, you could include a rule that says if it's required to have 2 acres for the 40,000 square foot, then if the parcel that's existing of record is less than that, then you could percentage that square footage to the percentage of the 2 acres that exist. Does that make sense?
it does, but I'm just wondering about just scaling in general.
I understand.
But set the standard a little lower, like, so that we don't end.
That's an interesting idea.
It's doubtful, given the configuration of that parcel, that you could get 40,000 square feet or 50,000 square feet on it, but if you wish to make that clarification based upon a formula, we can come up with one. It's basically, this is the smaller parcel, and then these would have to remain this size, and then, as I said, this is really the parcel that is uncertain. But that's something that certainly we can add a formula in for that. So we have provided that information, also attached to that. This was sort of a list with the breakdown. Trying to find that chart.
But we would be able to do that with properties on record. I mean, we could go back and.
Yeah, because they're still having the right to build. You're just scaling their building. You're doing the same thing to the other ones that are of record, that are 3.5 acres, and you're limiting them to 40,000 square foot.
I don't think people can hear you guys.
So can you do that of lot of record? That's the
Yes.
question. Yeah, you're doing the same thing to the other lots that are 3.5 acres. You're limiting them to 40,000 square foot. You're doing the exact same thing to that lot that you would do to the smaller one. That's being predicated off a 2 acre requirement. So if the other acre is only an acre, we would do a percentage that says, we do a formula that says the percentage of the acreage is equivalent to the square footage. So if it's only 1 acre, they only get 20,000 square foot building instead of a 40,000 if they had the 2, because it's a parcel of record. If it wasn't a parcel of record, they couldn't reduce it down and get the reduction.
Right.
The other piece of information I gave you were some updated numbers based upon the business license information that we've received so far this year. These are campgrounds, or actually, I don't know.
That's a condo?
Yeah, I don't know exactly why they are up here in yellow. But I got this spreadsheet from Rachel, our treasurer, and she needs it for other purposes. So her coloring and my coloring are probably different. But so all of the orange ones are what I would call hotels and motels. So I added all those up. And then I also noted the projects that are in the works, including the Henry Shaw. They're in that lighter orange color. Oh, gosh.
What's our choice square footage? Do you have?
Which is Moab My Place. Radcliffe Hotel, which is about to break ground. So those are all of the ones that are in, that are pending. Is 388.
So in one of the earlier charts, or I don't know, documents, maybe it's in the agenda summary, I think it mentions that Lions Back isn't included. How is it being categorized, as a hotel motel, or?
It has not been included really at all. It's mostly condominiums, and even the hotel product that they were originally discussing. My understanding is they came back in and did an amendment and are going toward less of a hotel and more of a sort of resort type property, kind of in the middle of the project. But not knowing how many bedrooms there could be, If these condos have three, I don't know. So I have not included them because I don't have a handle on the total number, quite frankly.
So Nora, there's two graphs in the packet, and it's, like it shows the Hyatt down to the Archway end. And
Yes.
those numbers that you did. And then, should we go off the numbers, because they're not all the same as the listing down below? Like the Bowen Motel shows that it's 41 rooms, but on this chart right here, it shows 45.
45 is what they asked for in their business license.
Oh, okay.
So, and 41, we probably got by phoning them and saying, how many rooms do you have?
Okay.
Because that's what I did with a number of these that I didn't know. So there may be some discrepancy.
There was a couple, I just kind of ran through some of them, and it seemed like there was. So use the list down below as the most accurate list for the business license, the graphs you're on right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a total including everything. This is the total of hotels. And this is, well, that has to do with, this is the number of hotels. This is the total number, and I think 388 is the number of pending hotel units, should be. So, that's just some additional information. Everybody is throwing around the 38%. That I think the county came up with that number. We didn't participate in the development of that number. So I just wanted to give you the numbers as we have them and based upon our existing business licenses. Certainly there are probably units out there that are not business licensed. I'm not sure if there are hotels and motels that aren't, but there might be some others. But I tried to concentrate on the hotels and motels. Okay. So that provides you with a little bit more information.
Okay, so Nora, let me ask you if you would agree with this statement. I see that your numbers may differ somewhat from what the county has. Do you agree with the statement that there are still a substantial number of overnight accommodations that are vested that are not yet built in comparison to the existing OA stock? Regardless of whether it's 38% or a slightly different number, would you agree that what's out there is still a significant impact on what we already have?
So the existing hotel rooms, we have 2136, and pending hotel rooms, we have 604. So, yeah.
Okay, that's all I wanted to acknowledge. So,
I think the 38% was someone's calculation that included city and county.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm sure it did.
So, but it is good to note that the city, we didn't participate in that number.
Right. Well, we may have, but I don't know where it came from, and I can't really, we didn't generate it, so I don't know exactly what was included in that number. It was before my time, and I can't really find, it just keeps coming up. So anyway, I thought I would give you just additional information about that. So,
thank you for calculating that and for putting all of this information together.
So I don't know, I mean, the things that we're really looking for direction on include the energy efficiency. At one point, I think at the end of your last meeting, you talked about the possibility that the 80% that's currently drafted might make some sense after all, because that's a high priority. I have met with, one of our planning commissioners put me in touch with a fellow who a contractor who feels very strongly that that would be impossible to meet, and that what he would be more comfortable with, and this is, somebody who does development, with more like 25%, that would be something that would truly be achievable. There are hotels throughout the country that are really trying to go net zero, and there's a whole sort of association of green hotels that are trying their best to offset their energy consumption as much as possible. So it's really a trend in hotels to try to do that. Most of those hotels are probably upper end. So there's energy efficiency, density and size. We talked a little bit about it, but we didn't get to it at our last meeting, whether you're comfortable with the 40,000 square feet. I also want to talk about the commercial, the incentive for additional commercial square footage. I based it, I just changed it a little bit to clarify some things, but it does incentivize an additional 20,000 square feet of commercial. They can get an extra floor or 20 units of overnight accommodations. And the counties turned out to be 15 and 50, 15 for one single building, 50 for the overall project. So I wanted your take on the mixed use requirements, and then, what was the other thing? I know there's a lot of information on here. So it's basically energy efficiency, mixed use requirement, maximum building size, and whatever else you want to talk about. So with that, I'll turn it over to you.
What's the pleasure of the council? What would you like to do for the
How much time
remainder
do
of
you
our
want?
time with Nora?
How much more time do you want to take with Nora tonight?
That's what I'm asking.
Well, let me just throw out this very quickly, if I
It
may.
seems like Nora has some questions.
Yeah, and I just presented them.
And so, do you guys want to talk? Do we want to go through her questions one by one?
Do we want to go over the codes and I can kind of go through it? Except I can't get it to come up.
What would help you the most?
Can I ask a question? Because it feels like a while back, we were at a fork in the road where we were weighing our decision about whether or not we were going to move forward with or without metering. But there's been conversation since our last council meeting that I think individuals have had. There was a community petition that I think we all
Yes, I
read.
forwarded that to you.
And so I just wanted to see where and I think Nora needs to hear from this council if we are wanting to revisit overlay, or are we still okay moving forward with the resort commercial, with standards in resort commercial?
Right.
That's what Nora needs to hear, I think,
Okay,
to
well,
start, and then maybe we can go through some of those standard questions.
Okay, so let me try to do this in 60 seconds. All right, Nora. So we hear a lot about slow down development. We hear a lot of input from the public saying, hey, why don't we let things get built out and see where we stand? It looks to me like we have three ways of slowing down, or metering, if you will. One way is aggressive standards. That's more or less what we've written so far. The standards that we have here now are, in my opinion, still kind of weak in some respects, but in other respects, they're quite aggressive. In particular, if we stick with the 80% renewable on-site, particularly if you count electricity and gas and maybe even what it takes to dry sheets, for example. That's, if I was a developer, that would give me pause about whether I want to build a hotel or not. That would slow things down. My question for you guys is, are you comfortable using standards in that fashion? I am uncomfortable with it, all right, because on the one hand, we're writing standards that supposedly say to a developer, this is what the town needs. We so wish that you would, we're going to require you to meet these certain standards. But it's really kind of has an underhanded purpose to it. I mean, the idea is to try to slow things down. So it's kind of like saying, go ahead and go, but you really can't. And so for that reason, I'm a little nervous about pursuing just standards alone, even though they're aggressive. So I want to know how the rest of you feel about it, because some of you may well make an argument, well, it's a perfectly good way of slowing things down so far as I'm concerned, and it would avoid having to go to overlays, you wouldn't have to put a clamp on things until everything was all the vested stuff was built out. So how do you guys feel about that? The question is, are you comfortable with the idea of using very aggressive standards that developers may say, hey, there's no way we can do this, or not?
I'll start. I'm an advocate for having very strict standards, and then if we find that it is impossible, then we can look at loosening them later, but starting very tight and then coming back from that is, that's where I'm comfortable going. And like you said, the energy standards are very rigorous, but the commercial, you know, if we're gonna go down your line, I don't think I think our commercial space is too low at 5%. So I don't know if we're gonna revisit those sort of numbers. And then,
We're willing to revisit anything.
Okay.
It's all on the table.
Okay.
Anything you guys want to change, talk
So
about.
thank you
work
for,
on.
that's me.
that's what
Yes,
you're
that's
presenting.
me.
You want higher commercial, but you're okay with the rest of the standards as they are?
Yes, I
And
prefer
you're
not to
okay
go
with that in lieu of
an overlay.
an overlay?
Yes.
Okay.
I prefer the higher standards over an overlay too. I think it becomes way too subjective. And just, this is really quick, just to address the energy net zero. There are apartments up in Harriman or someplace, I can't remember, they're called Salil Lofts. And they are 100%
Sustainable.
100% solar. They generate everything, they generate all of their energy and they sell back to the grid. They have a zero waste component to rent the apartments. So it's not going to be as lucrative, but I think it can be done.
Certainly for electricity, and we may want to clarify that.
And 80% on-site, 20 additional percent
Subscriber solar.
subscriber solar.
Yeah.
Kalen?
For RC zone only, I'm willing to try using standards to balance what the benefits of new development with other community needs. And I'm okay with the standards as written, but I still have an outstanding question about, there's been some large motorcycles.
Yeah. That's funny that comes up tonight, right?
Oh, it's my laptop.
It's your laptop?
I got a V6.
That's not an OHV outside?
The assured housing offers a option to calculate the economics of individual developments and for the developer to propose alternative assured housing numbers or fee in lieu based on the economics of the specific project. And these standards will probably cost something, and so I'm still concerned that a developer will come to the city and say, I am per your new lodging standards, I am doing these things, but I have less left over for the housing component, and I want them to do both. I don't want to trade some of these things for reduced housing, because housing is the well-documented crisis that we're trying to deal with. And I don't think that's a good trade. I think it has to be all of these things, including housing.
So to address that real quick, you guys passed the housing requirement a year ago, approximately. Not quite that long ago, but a while ago. It was over a year ago, I guess, now. Yeah, anyways, they're two separate ideas and they're two separate ordinances, and it does not give us as staff the authority to negotiate one for the sake of the other. So the only way we could negotiate the housing requirement would be for you guys to pass an ordinance changing either the original housing requirement or in this new one, adopting rules that amend that one. So currently, the way that this one is being presented and the way that the housing component was passed, we're not eligible to do that as staff. We can't negotiate one for the other.
Right, so the assured workforce housing requirement is required,
Yep.
period.
No, there's a calculated option where,
Sure.
yeah, I mean.
But that's not being affected by this in any way.
Right.
That
I'm
rule
saying that
is-
my support of this is contingent on that being addressed.
Awesome. Oh, you want it to be increased?
No, I think he's saying that it could be affected if a builder comes and says, this is such a burden doing.
But I'm telling you, that's not the case.
But they,
I don't have the authority to do that.
well, but if in the Wahoo, it says that they can
think we all-
present
Oh,
a
sure.
case to show that,
That would be up
Right.
to you guys.
okay.
I'm not approving that as a staff member. That would absolutely come back to you guys if that was the case.
You're not approving, are you talking legislative or a specific project?
If a project came in and said, we want to reduce the requirement for housing for benefit for what we're giving you in a hotel, I would never as staff approve that. That would absolutely come to you for approval, if we even considered that.
But we have a pathway for
I
them to do that,
And I'm saying
or
under, yeah, go ahead.
And no, I'm not accusing you or any staff.
I'm not taking it that way. And anyway, I'm telling you, I wouldn't dare do that.
But I'm just saying that this is potentially a loophole in the like if we pass this ordinance as written, and given the way my understanding the assured housing ordinance is, that we won't necessarily, I'm not
Get
sure
one or
that
the
we're gonna
other.
Mm-hmm.
get what we want.
And I understand that. My response as staff and as the admin departments that will be interpreting these codes, that's not how we're reading them, and we're not interpreting them that they can do one with the other. The housing requirement is the housing requirement. This requirement will be its standalone, and we're not going to let them use one to negotiate with the other. That's what I'm telling you. And I'm still understanding, you're saying there's a mechanism within that if they come back with benefits, we can consider them. Correct?
No,
No.
more of a,
Maybe it would help if someone pulled up the code.
Joe, because Joe, the whole Nexus study was founded on the notion of, A, what can hotels afford to do from their profit margin?
I understand.
And
Nora-
they're going to say it's way smaller is what they're going to say.
So let's go down this route. Like, they may say, I'm gonna make slightly less money, so then they're gonna negotiate with us, a lower rate or less units. You think, I heard you just
Oh,
whisper zero.
I'm sure they'll claim they shouldn't
They're doing that
build
now.
any housing at all.
They're doing that now without this ordinance.
Yeah, so what then the process is that we then go into a negotiation on the new calculated amount that gets developed, right, of housing. I think Karen's suggestion of increasing commercial would probably have a bigger impact on the calculated, then I don't know that these standards with 5% commercial are gonna have as much of effect. If we say 50% commercial, then they might be like, that's just, we're not able to maximize nightly rentals, and they could argue with us to reduce that affordable housing requirement.
So there's a process that's outlined in the Assured Workforce Housing Requirement that theoretically shouldn't mix with this at all. I mean, they have to do it. There is an appeal process.
We're currently in that
And
process
we're
with
in the
one
middle of
developer.
that
Like
right
I'm,
without any of these
Yes,
standards.
that's-
Yeah, okay, so we have to just expect that that's gonna happen.
yes.
Okay.
It's happening as we speak. And our position is, this is what I'm trying to tell you. Our position is staff currently in this process that we're using with the housing it's non-negotiable. And we have one that is full appeal at this point. We're sticking to, no, this is the number, this is where we're at. And we're in the appeal process to determine whether or not that's the case. So we have not negotiated it. It's non-negotiable based off our direction as council has given us going into this as staff.
Or
I'm telling you.
not even saying that, but like if it goes beyond our staff and then it goes into litigation. I mean, like, we're just,
The only way that formula changes and the only way we back away from that is if that's your direction.
Right, okay.
I understand the concern, though, like how much is too much,
Yeah.
and housing is important.
And the idea behind the housing was that if you're building so much overnight accommodation, you have to provide housing. If Karen's number increased the amount of commercial that reduced the amount of overnight accommodation, that reduced the housing requirement, that's not us negotiating. At that point, the whole point of overnight accommodations was the housing requirements was to offset overnight accommodations. If they're building less overnight accommodation because you're getting commercial and therefore requiring less employee housing, that's what we want as a city as well. We want more commercial development, less overnight. So yes, that would adjust it, but that's not us as staff adjusting it. That's the formula that's currently in there adjusting it.
Okay, so Nora, I would like to second Karen's inclination to provide a larger percentage of commercial space. I think the 5% number is way too low.
So 5%, and I think I talked about this last time, 5% is kind of the amount in a hotel that's usually designated for some kind of commercial. And in many places, it's like a maximum allowance so that you don't have commercial uses in a hotel which are competing with commercial elsewhere. Like in Park City, when I worked there, there's a maximum of 5% commercial for a hotel, motel, condo, whatever. So what we're doing is saying you have to do 5%, but then do the incentive that if you do 20%, if you do 20,000 square feet of commercial, then you get an extra floor of accommodations. So we tried to do it with an incentive-based program, but if you want to start with a larger overall, 10%, 15%, whatever you want, we can do that too, and then have another incentive on top of that or not.
So the 5% commercial is just within the footprint of the hotel itself?
Yes.
So if they've got 3.76 acres and they do a hotel on 2 acres of that, they've still got 1.76 acres. They have to have their parking and all of the other things that go along with the hotel. But if they develop the other portions of that as commercial, that gives them another floor if they meet that requirement.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I completely understood that 5% was within the footprint.
And then if they got the additional floor, that would increase their rooms again, which would drive back up their housing.
Do more housing.
Yep.
Yeah, so one thing about the solar stuff I want to point out to you guys, I like the idea of having to step back floors, first floor and then another, but it's a shading problem for solar panels, okay? That means that you would have to park a hotel basically so that if you wanted to generate decent amounts of solar panel for all those bucks you just put out there, don't let get it shaded by the, you can't put a tall, probably be the worst on the west side, I would guess. In other words, any sun that comes from the south had better shade anything that you want to be power. And if you have
You might just have a hotel, you might just have overnight accommodations on the first floor only.
I don't know how they're going to do it. I'm just trying to point out, if you have roofs of different heights,
have to do,
you can't, if you want to park solar panels on the lower roof and they get shaded, it won't do you any good. That's all I'm saying.
Right. I understand. And we don't, what all we're requiring is a setback for the 15 feet for the first, just so that against the road, it's not a 3-foot structure.
I understand that, and that's fine.
Okay.
So Mike, thank you so much. Ronnie, you still haven't responded.
I can see why people wanted to discuss overlays, and I think it's pretty clear, given what this council's been through with conditional use permits. I can see why the majority of people aren't interested. Would be willing to have the conversation, but since the majority of people seem happy with standards, I think it's okay to go down the standard path, but I don't know if I'm the exception, but I am someone who feels like the community is asking for some form of metering, and I feel like that's something that's important to me, and I have to get a little clearer on what the county did in terms of, it seems like, they had some ratio they were gonna work with
I can tell you if you're interested.
Well, but just to finish, so what you're saying is that you're willing to do standards as opposed to
kind of like Kaylin for the RC. I'm okay with that.
For the RC, okay. And then commercial, thoughts on commercial?
I had a long laundry list before I left for the holidays of questions.
And I have answered them, but I haven't sent them to you just because I know what it's like.
Yeah. So some of that for me is I feel like I need to digest some of that. So, I think that everybody's conversation and suggestions are good, but I don't personally have enough brain cells at the moment to, say anything specific about commercial.
Okay, so based on what I'm hearing from all of you, for the resort commercial, we're going to continue moving forward with the standards. We've still got some outstanding standard questions. And those lie in that 80% energy, on-site energy development requirement, the percentage of commercial, and the impact that this may have on our ability to leverage affordable housing units through the WAHU if we've got greater restrictions. Does that seem like a pretty safe summary of where we are as a council? Then it feels like you, Nora, may have your questions answered. And at this point then, are you going back to Planning Commission?
Yes.
And you'll be like sort of diving into these deeper conversations about commercial, and you can
We
look at
could, or you could give me direction about what you think makes the most sense. Is it 15%? I mean, if you're ready to really talk about those things, or we can ask the Planning Commission what their thought is.
Before it was stated by this council that we wanted to give that back to the Planning Commission to workshop. And then the one other thing that I would say that we haven't talked yet about tonight, other than the stepping, is just basic design criteria as well. And I think that if those 4 things are workshopped by the Planning Commission, and then there was a recommendation sent to us, I think we might be in a pretty good place.
If I could say something about the design criteria a little bit, you know, there are lots of places out there that do a lot of design review and are very particular about what gets built. And some people may say that then everything looks alike, like all the apartments in Salt Lake City that look alike, because they're, you know, they all meet the certain design standards. In Park City, everything looks alike. In Moab, everything doesn't look all alike, and never really has. We're just so eclectic, which is part of our charm. So it's hard to say, you know, you have to, and we have some historic buildings, but we don't really have a historic district. And so, you know, we can always take a deeper dive at a later time into design standards if you really want to go that way. It's going to be pretty hard to go a lot farther. All I tried to do was address some of the major objections, which are that these big walls, and it's right on the highway, and it's 3 stories, and there's no breakup in facade. And so I tried to just address some of the basic elements that would reduce mass in a building. If we're going to get into a deeper dive into design review and design guidelines, then that's a whole different exercise.
I want to just throw it out there as an option for the planning department to meet with 1 or 2 council members to just spend a couple hours to just workshop some basic, like looking at a picture of every hotel motel that we have in Moab and kind of put I like this pile together, tease from that the elements of what feels good about standards, and then maybe that can be passed to the Planning Commission. What would any of you be interested in doing that, or does that just feel like not worth it?
I can meet with the planning department.
You'd be interested in that, Tony? Yeah. I'm looking at you, Kaylin, just because you have a background in architecture and have talked
I have a
standards
background in attempting to legislate good taste and, via design standards, which is a challenge. Yes, I'd be willing to do that. I had hoped that we might do a visual preference survey process with the whole council, but failing that, I think a committee.
I think that's what I'm suggesting is like not do a visual preference with the whole council, especially if we're looking at existing stock. I think that might feel uncomfortable. So if 2 of you, and then if you feel like you have unanswered questions, maybe pull in a couple other council members to respond to decisions.
Well, I mean, I would just like to point out, so having standards like Salt Lake, I don't think that's what we're looking for in Moab. But you go to Springdale, and you look at the hotels that they've built, and they are architecturally compatible with the landscape that Zion's National Park brings. And I mean, they're absolutely beautiful. And so how?
And their standards are very loose, by the way.
Really?
I mean, I looked at them and ours are more strict in terms of what we're proposing here. I think they really have support of their commercial folks. I don't know if it's through Chamber of Commerce or what it is, but I think everybody at some point agreed to just kind of step it up. And so they have. They also do have more strict standards for sort of their main core, whether it's historic or not. So they have a little bit more, but they do not have a design review team. And their standards are pretty general.
I mean, that's surprising because the Marriott there did a
Yeah.
lodge style that, you know, I mean, is.
I'm sure
See,
there
and
was
you
a lot of
used a
discussion
word
about it.
that it probably makes sense. You said they're beautiful.
Oh.
Maybe
Right.
that's very subjective,
Yes.
because there are a couple of buildings in our town that I have heard people say are beautiful, and I just kind of go, not to these eyes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well, then I like moving forward with this idea of a committee, and then if you, after a couple hours, feel like, gosh, let's bring in a couple others, and then, Karen, if you want to even just set up a little time to look at those design standards in that community, to just kind of throw that in there, and that could be helpful to the Planning Commission. And I guess if any other council members have things, pass them on to Nora so that they can be workshopped with the Planning Commission.
I do,
as well.
I'd love to, Nora, and I've written you guys comments before saying this needs to be defined, this
Yes.
needs to be defined, this is, you know, and nothing, frankly, nothing really has happened. Okay, so if I send you some specific language, will you promise to take a close look at it?
Sure.
Okay. You don't have
I
to accept
can.
it, but I just want to, I've been dismayed, all right, because I feel like I'm just kind of saying things and falling into it.
Well,
I think
So
maybe
that-
it might be
so-
helpful, based on that comment, that you have a meeting with Nora so that
Yeah.
you can
And-
have this conversation.
And with me.
Okay.
yeah.
So you initially sent out an email and Nora asked me to respond to you, and I'd reached out to you. It was right around Christmas, and then we got I'm going to be gone for 2 weeks. I'm falling off the earth for a while, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'd set a meeting with you to discuss a lot of that, and then you
Was
had
that what that
canceled
was?
it. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So it's on us. We should have followed up and got back with you when you got back, but I don't want you to think we were ignoring those comments. We weren't.
Okay,
So,
so let me make an effort to do that,
Okay.
okay? We'll see what we
Mayor,
do.
can I
That'd be
just
good.
ask a question, or maybe this is for Nora too? So just looking at the draft ordinance, like some of the questions you had for us on there, like about gray water, does it benefit us to just quickly address those so Nora knows what to do with those?
for us as staff, yes.
Yeah.
If you guys have the,
Yeah, I just want to say it's 9 o'clock, so let's be very quick about, to identify, knowing that the decisions or the recommendations we have here are going to go to the Planning Commission and then come back to us. And so if a concern isn't stated tonight, there's always room to share with Nora to be then workshopped with Planning Commission. So you want to go through just a couple of those? How many? It's like 3 questions? I mean, I thought those.
Water.
Huh? Yeah, gray water. Yep.
So the county council included a gray water standard, but at this point, it's not legal. It can't be done. So, and I know that there are changes this season that are going to come, we hope, in the legislative session, but they're not there now.
It wouldn't be legislative session. It's the recommendation from the Water Quality Board, of which I'm a member, and it looks like it's going to pass. So.
Well, whatever. If you want me to put it in, I can put it in.
So I read it, and I mean, not knowing more and not being a lawyer, do you ever put stuff in here that says, pending, passage of
Yeah.
whatever, commercial gray water, whatever it's going to say, and then
I would
you stick
I
your
would
language in
prefer-
there? Or
I would
don't
prefer
know.
I would prefer to just follow it, and when it passes, add it in. Because then you have the language from what passed
Okay,
passes
that's-
to add in, and then it's, because if you pass something now, and then they go in and they end up amending what they're proposing, and it changes, now you have language in your code that doesn't match what was,
It's
unless you
probably-
just say we were going to adopt whatever they pass.
And it's probably going to pass before it gets back to us, is
Okay.
what I'm saying. But what Mike said in his reports earlier tonight, it's nighttime, is that the Water Quality Board, our Moab Water
The advisory
Board did meet and will be meeting again to develop a recommendation for us for this as well. So maybe what we can say is for you to hear and anyone else to hear, to share that with the Water Board, that their recommendation really could go to the Planning Commission and be part of that process. And then that would be helpful to them, and then it'd come back to us. So they don't have to present us with options. They could present it to the Planning Department to then be incorporated with the
I
Planning
think if we
Commission.
use, and I think if we use generic terms like we're adopting whatever passes as the new state code on gray water, I think that would be okay, as long as we're not trying to draw out terms in advance.
Were there other questions that we needed to talk about besides
Not
that?
really. There are a number of design-related issues that the county has chosen not to adopt, and I've indicated those on the draft ordinance.
At this point, does the council or does staff have anything else to say tonight about overnight accommodations?
There was one question about metering, and I don't know if are we just not going there right now?
I think we all agreed that we're not going to use metering.
At this point, we're,
Okay, sorry. Nora, go ahead.
no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I didn't understand. I think there's still room to,
For the resort commercial?
yes. But to figure out build out, to figure out
Yeah,
ramifications of build out.
metering is an issue for me, especially, I don't know if I did the math right, but this looks like 28% increase to me.
Oh, wait, so not overlay. You're saying separate, metering separate from
Oh,
overlay?
yeah, not overlay.
So you're saying maximum, as the metering as maximum?
So Grand County, and I don't know how they're doing this, but in their language, they are using carrying capacity analysis. And what exactly that means, how they're gonna justify that, are
It
we?
means the number of new OAs they're going to accommodate are proportional to the
So how do you
residential
determine
population.
that? What is your carrying capacity?
Oh, they've got quite, it's a simple ratio, I think.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
that's-
I understand they came up with the ratio. My question is, how did they determine what their carrying capacity was? I understand they have a ratio for it. How did that get determined?
They
Where's-
count the number of residents, and then they count the number of new OAs, and they measure the ratio.
I was just wondering if you guys knew how they knew.
Yeah, but that's the question I have, Mike, is I can make up a formula to get you a number that you're looking for. That's not,
I have another.
what's your rationale for it? What's your legal basis
I'm
for
going to
it?
stop this because I have a suggestion that I think can help us move forward on our agenda. And that is, this is some new-ish, this is a newish concept. This is something that I think the Planning Commission can actually tackle. It is a ratio of residential to commercial, like specific to hotel. And that's something that the Planning Commission could run with as well. Rather than us spending time right now to hash it out, I think it's better suited for us to get a little organized and again, direct it to the Planning Commission to have this conversation about using ratio to meter. Yeah?
Can I say one more little thing?
Yes. Is that a yes? Is that a thumbs up yes? A thumbs down.
So, I think they'd be happy if they never saw it again, but.
Well, it's coming anyway.
Right.
For a final look over.
So the county talked about, kind of in the work session before they approved this, they talked about this 1 to 1.4 ratio. 1.4 overnight accommodations to one primary residential unit. And at first, when it was introduced, they said it would be a standard that would have to be applied. And I said, well, do you not accept applications, or functionally, how do you do that?
So they decided to change the language so that it says the city council or the county council shall consider these factors in granting an application for the overlay district. So they've really sort of backed off a strict ratio, and now it's just one of the items that they can consider when applying the overnight.
But that's, yeah,
Going
in applying
into
the
an
overlay.
overlay.
That's why I'm saying,
Yeah.
like, this is but it would not be an overlay, it would be a cap.
Right.
And we would have that ongoing data in the planning department, so that if ever anyone was like, I want to do a hotel, then we'd be like, well, we need 20 more homes built in Moab before our ratio is to the place where we can say yes to more hotels. That's the way I read that. What, here?
Oh, no, I was wondering if it would be possible to say, okay, we're gonna wait till we have the findings for the USGS study that we've been waiting for forever to find out what our water capacity is.
Yes, so.
Is that,
I think that helps. I mean, that's my question. I'm not opposed to metering, and I'm not, like, my point is, I need something to tie it to that I can justify as a legal standing for, our ratio is this based off our water. Our ratio is this based off this capacity. But to just say our carrying capacity is 112 rooms based on 12.
right. No, I would feel more comfortable if we knew it. Oh, shoot, we're good with water. Let's go
So that's
forward with
I'm
that.
not opposed to the metering idea. I'm just saying we need to figure out, if that's where we're going, we need to figure out how we're going to have a rational basis to a carrying capacity.
Okay.
Well, Joel, let me ask you, how do you feel? Here's still another one that I've been proselytizing and so forth, which just simply says, wait until the VESTA stuff is built out, wait till the highway is widened, wait till the USGS study. The study came out, but there's another paper in the works that hasn't been peer reviewed yet that says, if it holds up, that we're already withdrawing from the aquifer what the recharge rate is. And state law says we can't exceed that. We can't mine the groundwater. If that paper holds up, and it's going to take a while for it to get reviewed and get submitted to a groundwater management plan and get us all to come to consensus on it. But if it comes up, it's a game changer. And I don't feel good making rules about a bunch of new hotels coming in here until we have that in hand.
I don't think anyone's advocating for a bunch of new hotels. I don't think that's.
You set the standards too low, that's what would happen, unless.
Is anyone advocating to set the standards too low? Are we doing that?
Have anybody advocated for, I'm sorry, what?
Your scenario, that we're advocating for a bunch of new hotels to come in here, or when I said no one's advocating for that.
I'm speculating that if the standards, let's put it this way, if we were to remove the standard, I mean, if we didn't postulate aggressive standards, why wouldn't developers go back?
You're presenting hypotheticals that don't exist. That's the point I'm making.
I want to hear from the Water Quality Board too, like, we get 9 inches of rainfall a year. We said that we would have that be utilized for landscaping for these developments, catch it. But we could get more aggressive if we truly think that our water capacity is a critical, then let's require all new construction to utilize rainwater, whether it's hotel or residential. It's a bigger conversation.
And I think.
And then we're like literally like addressing that issue. You will use less water.
Yeah.
You'll be required to,
And where Mike's going is correct. If we get that study, and that's what the water says, that is a game changer. Absolutely. And until we get that study, we need to go with the standards we can verify, what we are trying to do, and we need to make those steep enough that they get the same result.
So let's stiffen water.
Why? What's the big rush in reinstating OAs?
Just like with sexually oriented businesses, we have to say yes somewhere. It's our responsibility as land use.
May I suggest we move on?
Managers.
For one night. We'll talk, okay.
That's First Amendment.
Yeah, it is a First Amendment. It is also a property right.
But that's just, no, it's just, you get beneficial use. And the okay, we're getting
in the weeds.
We're getting in the forest.
So we're
far off in the weeds.
We're moving on. That got exciting.
Wow.
We are now in new business. That was fun.
Yeah.
11.1, the confirmation of mayoral appointment of Luke. Wait, I can do this.
Wait for it.
What's your house key? Where's your house key? Where's your house key? Where's your house key? Slurred. Luke, where's your house key? To the City Planning and Zoning Commission. Is there a motion?
I move to confirm the mayoral appointment of Luke Wojciechowski to the City Planning and Zoning Commission, effectively immediately to replace the appointment formerly held by Allison Bram.
Thank you, Kaylin.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
But you have to tell us how to say your name.
Tani. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Luke, will you come up here, please? Shake my hand and tell us how to pronounce it.
I don't want to hear everybody's attempt first.
Okay, I've got,
So English, Wojciechowski, Polish, Wojciechowski.
Where's your house key? Rhymes with brevity. Okay,
Can we call you Luke?
Yes.
Luke. That's a Star Wars thing. I can't believe I did that. Only nerds would understand that reference. Okay, 11-12, reappointment of Arnie Hulquist to the Water Conservation and Drought Management Advisory Board, term commencing immediately and expiring on December 31st, 2022. Is there a motion?
So move.
Thank you.
Second.
Mike? Thank you. Kaylin? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. 11-3, reappointment of Cara Dornrend. And I should say we have certificates for if and when they come back to the council. Maybe you can bring them to the meeting? Thank you. Cara Dornrend to the Water Conservation and Drought Management Advisory Board, term commencing immediately and expiring on December 31st, 2022. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to confirm the reappointment of Cara Downman.
Thank you, Karen.
I will second.
Thank you, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. And we are now on to the 11-4 ordinance 2020-01, an ordinance, first ordinance of the year, approving a zoning map amendment for property owned by the City of Moab at 193 Walnut Lane, mailing addresses 250 and 280 West Walnut Lane, from R2 single household and 2 household residential zone to R4 manufactured housing residential zone, and amending the City of Moab official zoning map. Caitlin, thank you for sticking around. You've got a small presentation for us tonight.
I mean, I just kind of put the agenda summary into a PowerPoint.
So if the council's comfortable with
yes,
what was in the
so-
summary, we can go ahead and just have discussion?
Yes, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Could you
Will you
explain
accept a
why
motion?
C1 doesn't work?
Why, C1?
This is for Walnut Lane.
Oh, yeah, this is for
No,
Walnut Lane.
no, this is Walnut Lane.
So embarrassing.
No
embarrassing.
Cs.
Will you accept a motion?
I would accept a motion.
I move to approve ordinance 2021-01, approving the zone changes. Wait a minute.
the motion is wrong.
Yeah,
Oh, that's what you just said.
Yeah.
All right, I move to, let somebody else do it, because now I'm confused.
Okay, somebody else do
Sorry
it.
about that.
You could say as presented. What?
Is this one correct?
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, you could just read
All right,
the.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-01, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for property owned by the City of Moab at 193 Walnut Lane from R2 single household and 2 household residential zone to R4 manufactured housing residential zone, and amending the City of Moab official zoning map.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. I think that's fine in terms of a motion, yes. Further discussion? All those, sorry.
Okay. Can I just ask you a question, Caitlin, that was sent to me only because other people might have the same question? So let's see. got sent this question from a resident that says, I and my neighbors who border the north in an all R2 zone support the city project, but have concerns about 30-foot apartment buildings bordering our single-story backyards. The city manager in an informal chat said that the current plan was to put the taller apartment-type buildings to the southern end of the property, currently zoned R4, and place a single-story family and duplex designs towards the northern border to reflect more of what the larger neighborhood represents. Sounds great in theory, but if there's pressure to keep construction costs low, would that still be the plan? And then they just ask, and I mean, the council can respond how they want, would it be possible to not change to the zoning until the design proposal actually is done to see where and how 83 affordable units can be arranged on the property? The neighbors look forward to working with the city. I think, yeah, their question is just, would like to have some reassurance about height and I guess involvement is the way I took it. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, first I'll say that at this point we are intending to apply via the pad, so this would come before you. You'd have to approve the site plan at that time. That is still our intention. We, I guess kind of separately to update you, we extended the deadline for the RFP to January 30th. But, you know, we're just now entering into master planning. So, and we do want to engage the neighbors and we want to try and make that work. I don't have any solid answers. You know, you also asked me earlier about a question about manufactured housing on the site. And it's our intention to most likely use stick-built, but we just don't know at this point, and we're kind of waiting to see what we can figure out with the firms. But either way, the site plan will be coming before you again. So the zone changes partially just to correct what's existing on the site, because manufactured, basically the trailer park is not permitted in the R2 zone, so it's kind of to fix that. So. Yeah, we'll figure that out when we get to the site planning stage.
And it's not really fair to expect somebody to come up with an RFP if they don't know what the zoning is or if they're in some sort of flux. And so this is kind of just a good housekeeping measure to get this going correct. Okay.
And I mean, as a general principle for a rezone, it's not, you know, you're not supposed to consider what, you're supposed to consider all things that can happen in that zone, so.
But isn't it correct, though, in R2, you can have a 30-foot, two-story, single-family home? I mean, you can have 30 feet already. So
Correct.
To ask not to have 30 feet when you could have it in R2 doesn't
Correct. What's the height in R4, Summer? Height in R2 is,
so it's the
and
same.
height in
So it's the
R3
same.
is, okay.
Okay.
It sounds like they're saying, well, this might be a leverage point. What are the other ways that those residents will be made aware of the design of Walnut Lane?
So that's something that we're gonna need to figure out with our firm, but we have included in the RFP that we're gonna have 3 meetings here in Moab, and probably at least one of them, I mean, certainly they'll be meeting with you at council meetings, but we're also planning on having like community stakeholder meetings and meetings to meet with the residents about what they want and what they need for housing. And so, I mean, we're gonna have basically open, public, public design, schematic design meetings. So they'll be able to give their input at that point. Yeah. And I think Joel's already mentioned this before, but we are planning on putting up fences and protecting the surrounding neighborhood from the development either way, regardless of what goes back there.
So there's input and then there's leverage. So my question was like leverage, like would we have a public hearing? Would the public have a position, be in a position to like deny anything moving forward with this development?
I mean, certainly with the pad they would, right?
Okay.
What? It's a legislative decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not totally sure what all you mean by leverage, what leverage they would have.
Well, I mean, that's just what I'm reading from what that person said. Like, this zone change is maybe the only time to have a design comment. But
It seems like it's up to us. I mean, we're elected representatives, and it's just the extent to which we are willing to respond to people's concerns. And we're probably more willing than your average developer, but nevertheless, the relationship is still the same. The city is the property owner and has certain rights to develop it.
Okay.
But we are more likely to be sympathetic. And if there's a general concern, then with the process, then perhaps it should be adjusted.
Yeah.
Okay.
And those kinds of comments are more appropriate as it goes toward site planning review.
Okay.
America, ask Caitlin, how did your first open house go in December?
Oh, it went really well. Yeah, I mean, so first of all, at Planning Commission, we had signs on the site. We went out that day, that Thursday morning, to pass out flyers and make sure people knew about the event the following Monday. And we had like 10-ish residents come to the Planning Commission meeting and had kind of an informal meeting after and just answered questions. And then the next Monday when we had our open house, we probably had like 5 people in the morning come and, stand around a little fire and just talked about, what we're planning on doing. And then we probably had 3 or 4 more people in the evening. So, we've heard over and over again that word travels fast. And so we're pretty hopeful that we kind of got out the information that we've been wanting to communicate for a while. So I think it was really successful. I was actually really blown away that we had so many people.
Thanks, you guys, for doing that. That engagement is super important. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
It's good.
Okay, is there a motion?
There was a motion.
Oh, yeah. We've got a motion and a second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
It was
Thank
a
you,
good
Caitlin, for all of
first
your work.
ordinance of the year.
That is a good ordinance, probably. 11.5, ordinance 2020-2. An ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for properties owned by community rebuilds from R3 multi-household residential to C2 commercial residential zoning, and from C2 commercial residential to R3 multi-household residential zoning, and amending the City of Moab official zoning map. Nora?
Corey's going to give this presentation, but his computer's not working, so.
I apologize for running around. That's where I was trying to get with the tech guys to get my presentation back up. So Nora's going to pull up our network, hopefully.
I hope so.
And
Caps lock is on.
Well, while you're doing that, maybe we can just talk a little bit.
yes.
Okay.
So with the presentation, we have the collection of images that would display the proposed zoning as well as the current zoning. But just a brief summary, this item involves rezoning 2 properties that make up the Community Rebuilds campus, switching the associated zones and uses for each property to better utilize the properties and their location on the campus. Within the images, property located at 140 East will be referenced as parcel 1, and then 150 East as parcel 2. As we're talking about it, we can use a little shorthand.
I'm having a little trouble.
Yeah. So within parcel 1 is currently zoned R3 multi-household residential. The current use is for housing for the community rebuilds called the Ranch, formerly the Rancho Fandango Nightly Rentals. Parcel 2, currently zoned C2, commercial residential. The current use is additional housing for community rebuilds and operates as the community rebuilds office space within that little house.
So I'm in the network. I don't know exactly where the file is, so I'll just give this to you.
Can I interject something here that he just said? He said that.
No.
Oh, no.
No, thank you. Well, you might as well. Go ahead.
Well, he said that.
I don't usually allow this, so,
Oh, okay.
but go ahead.
Thank you. That the Fandango was nightly rentals. Well, it hasn't been, I don't
as a reference.
I could probably speak to that, because, yeah, it is not nightly rentals. It was operating as nightly rentals, as was the property Dreamkeeper across the street.
But the Dreamkeeper was a B&B.
Was a nightly rental for many years.
As a, yeah, bed and breakfast, is that the same thing as?
Yes.
Nightly rental?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, ironically, the Dreamkeeper was operated as a nightly rental. It's so funny, when Chad and I got married, my whole family stayed at the Dreamkeeper. It was like, and then every year thereafter for anniversaries, our families would stay at the Dreamkeeper. It was a nightly rental for a long time.
But there is a difference between nightly rental and B&B.
Yes, there is, because there's usually someone there on site
Yeah, the on-site manager.
or the owner.
Okay, so we have our presentation up and running. We'll continue to move on through. This is the
Oh, I'm sorry.
information regarding lot size and current use, as well as the proposed uses, which would be switching parcel 1 to C2 commercial residential zone and parcel 2 to R3 multi-household residential. This is the parcel map showing the vicinity map of the area, and then the current zoning to proposed zoning. So the more orange is the R3, the blue is the C2, and C3 is off to the left. For sake of time, I have more material, but I think I can open it up, and if you want to discuss it further, I can answer those questions as they come.
So I do have one question, if I may. I'm not the only one, I don't think. So I understand from Community Rebuild's description of their application that they considered C1 rather than C2 for parcel 1, but there was something about parking or something about the configuration that they were unhappy with, and that's why they applied for C2. So my question is, if C1 were granted as a compromise between the neighbor's interest and Community Rebuild's interest, would that work? Could that be made to work for Community Rebuilds, for the applicant?
Potentially. So what I've just pulled up now onto the screen is a rough draft proposal of where on that parcel 1 that new office space would be within the C2 requirements. With the requirements that we looked at the C1, the C2, the C4, and the C5, all of the different requirements of what would be possible before even going on to the next step. Depending on the zone which you're proposing, those requirements shift pretty dramatically, which would really make the development of that office space very difficult. So the C2 really wound up being the better of the options as far as the location of that office space to work with the parking requirements, the landscaping buffers, and the proximity to the established housing, if that makes sense.
So those stipulations differ between C1 and C2, I take it?
They do.
They must be. 'Cause, I mean, the reason I ask is I went back and looked briefly at the code for C1 and C2, the parking requirements, for example, and nearly as I can tell, if I've got this right, it's the same, so.
Correct. It's with the setbacks and then the landscaping buffers. So where that building is actually set onto that parcel would shift where you could actually put the parking stalls. So the number might not change, but where you might be able to maneuver them. So on this particular parcel is fairly tight. Kenny Fallon worked through a number of scenarios of how to fit that particular office within each of those, shifting the size of that office pretty dramatically to something that would not be functional in certain zones, if that makes sense. So this wound up being the best option for them, but also so that they could fit the parking, the ADA spaces, really meeting all their requirements to the fullest. As well as fitting in with the rest of the zoning around it was another consideration.
Okay, so did I hear you say that if they were restricted to C1, they're not left with any useful building size in for their headquarters? Is that correct?
They may be able to, but it would be more difficult.
How difficult?
I would.
They probably have to enter into a pretty aggressive shared parking agreement with the lot next door, which I know they own. And I think one of the things that they're trying to get around is having people hunting for them and driving down the, the driveway. And if they had to go through for parking, then it's kind of defeating the purpose of having a building close to the street so that people aren't hunting for it. C1 may have been C1 in this vicinity at one point in time, but it is all C2 now. C1 would therefore be a parcel with no C1 anywhere around it. Not that you can't do that, but that's just kind of the way, that's the way it would be. So, and they are requesting C2 at this point. After all of the analysis, they feel that works best for them, and this is their request, so we're bringing it to you.
So the petitioner mentioned that they would do a deed restriction on the property. Can they do that in perpetuity? I mean, does that go along with that? How do we document that? How does that go forward? So it would not be used for overnight accommodation.
So if you don't do anything, the other parcel that's in C2 is a big house on a big bunkhouse with lots of bedrooms. So, I mean, you could go through that, what you're asking.
Oh, I'm not asking. It was.
No. Well, what you're asking, the question that you're asking is that if the zone change didn't happen, there's still a whole lot of units in C2 right now.
Oh, yeah.
That's all I'm saying. So, for what it's worth.
So
it'd be less units.
I think the intention of the applicant was to do that regardless, for the nature of that business and what they do with those properties. What they're trying to do with this is make an even adjustment. Like Ricky had said earlier, it really just doesn't fit. And from a planning perspective, this makes a lot more sense to adjust the flag lot to put the street frontage commercial up front.
I guess my question is just, how does that hold up legally?
Karen's question is, how do they deed restrict the property, and how do we make sure that that runs in perpetuity with the land?
So is that
That's my question.
condition of approving it? Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious how you go about it. Like because it would alleviate a lot of, I think, stress of neighbors that, they don't want more overnight accommodations, and the developer's willing to do that. I mean, how do we just make sure that we enact that?
I wouldn't make it a part of your approval. I would just, you could table and wait and see what happens, but I wouldn't condition your approval upon that action. I would just
I think your question is just the mechanics of it. You just record it. You just record it against the property. So
she's asking how we guarantee that it happens.
I don't know. Was your question how?
Both. It's both.
Okay.
So how do we?
Well, the irony of the latter is that Community Rebuilds is one of the only organizations that actually does deed restrictions in our community. So they'd probably be well suited to deed restrict their own property.
Right. I'm just, everything has a life, and to say that it's going to be community rebuilds forever is
It's not realistic.
It isn't.
And if we change it to a C2, whatever is allowed in C2 can happen in C2.
Right.
Yeah, it's already C2. It's just the other side of it.
No.
It's R3.
So to clarify,
smaller parcels are 3.
To clarify
The larger
Tony's
parcels are 2.
To clarify
Or sorry,
Tony's
C2.
comments, that's 100% accurate. That if you change it to C2, anything that's permitted into C2 will be permitted in that zone. Currently, there are no overnight accommodations permitted in the C2. So if you make it C2 now, that it cannot be an overnight accommodation. If you change that, you would just have to know that when you change the C2 zone, after you've rezoned, if you approve the rezone, if you go changing C2, you're changing that everywhere in town, not just this one.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, if you choose to rezone this, you're not permitting overnight accommodations right now because they're not allowed there. If you then agreed to change C2 zones in general, you would be approving it everywhere there's a C2, not just this property. It would be a much broader issue at that point than just this location. And obviously, all this changes 2, 4, 8, 12 years from now. I mean, any council can come along and rezone, change the rules. So you're never guaranteeing anything forever.
I was, when Ricky told me about this, I was like, why would you want to do that? Your larger parcel is C2. You can have more use on that back lot, keeping it at C2. Not overnight accommodation, but office stuff and other stuff. But Ricky said, we really don't like people driving down the driveway. We think it's intruding on Ronnie and Nate's house. And that's what they, so they were looking at like, well, could we do a little office out front so people don't have to drive up and down next to Ronnie and Nate's house? That's where this all came from.
Yeah, and currently their office space, I'm sure you guys have been there, is a house. And so if the rezone took place, then the current office space would go back into the housing pool, because it's just a house is what they're using currently for an office.
And the house is, it's a non-conforming, well, it's currently in the C zone, but they don't have handicap access. And in order to get handicapped access, it would cost a lot of money to retrofit that. You have to put in new bathrooms and doorway widen and all those kinds of things. So the conclusion is that they'd rather have it as a house and build a separate building that's along the street for commercial use for their office.
And be ADA compliant in that.
Right.
And there's enough space on the existing property to do an office as well okay. I mean, for me, I think it doesn't make sense to have commercial behind residential. I mean, that is a backwards piece as it is, but.
They volunteered to do the deed restriction. I don't know if something, I don't know if we want to put a time limit on it or whatever, but we haven't made them do that. They are volunteering that, so.
So if it sells, does it go with the property though? Like,
Yes.
Forever? Or can they change it? Like, I mean, if they put, let's say, I don't want to use.
Can you
Ricky, so
remove your
Ricky
own
can-
deed restriction?
Yes, you can.
That's the question.
Yes, you can.
So before you sell a piece of property, you can remove whatever deed restrictions you have on
Unless
it.
it's assigned
Someone
to
else holds it.
another party, right?
Right,
You assign the
right.
deed restriction to someone else. Or if you sell it and keep it, then the new owner couldn't remove it either, because then it would be assigned to you, theoretically.
Okay, so I'm going to say a bunch of things. I talked to Lori earlier today, first to confirm if I had a conflict of interest, because I am the neighbor directly next to what's currently was the Fandango is the ranch. I also, my house is along the flag lot, and I face the back. I knew it was a conflict if you had a financial issue. I don't have any of that, but I wanted to make sure with Lori because we weren't sure if there was some kind of restriction since I'm a direct neighbor, but apparently there isn't. But I do think it's important for me to mention that I am a neighbor, and this whole thing is, no offense to anyone, just making me sick on top of everything else I'm dealing with in my life, but I will go forth because this comes with the job. First of all, I always feel like in issues like this, it's really easy for some undertones of finger pointing to happen, and I'm just trying to avoid that and be objective. And but in that regard, I think there's some historical things that have happened in this neighborhood that it's important for people to understand, and also some things, I mean, in my sense about community rebuild intentions that are probably equally important, which makes this something hard to decide about. Full disclosure, community rebuilds talked to me early on about whether I thought this was, what my thoughts about this idea, if they even proposed this, and honestly, our neighborhood has changed a lot, and I also understand the housing needs in the community, and so I can understand their desire to move their office out of a house and use that house for housing. The second question becomes, are you building an office in the back lot, or are you building an office in the front lot? And asking for a zone change because you could build an office in the back lot as it is. when we talked, I said, I don't know how other people will feel about this. I feel like if, if you want to put forth a zone change, I think there's a lot of history in this community where people would want to see it deed restricted if that's something you're willing to do. I'm not telling anyone what to do. That was just full disclosure, some of my initial thoughts when it came forth. And I should say community rebuilds have been, good neighbors in terms of communicating with us. At the same point, I think a lot of people who don't live on this street don't understand how many times neighbors along these two streets have been through potential or real zone changes and how much energy that takes, and the history of what's happened. Diane talked some earlier about, and this precedes me, the efforts to initially change the Cali-Cachita from residential to commercial. So that eventually happened to C1. Some people considered it, I don't know at the time, I don't have the documents from the time, I think it was around late 90s, whatever, maybe 2000. Some people considered it to be a spot zone because it was the only C1, but when I read the description of C1, and since it was a new zone, I have a feeling that they probably did that very consciously because the C1 was intended as a buffer zone for my reading. I'm no expert, but buffer zone for residential and commercial to kind of ramp up to some of the C2 nearby. So you had, when that finally passed, you had a corner turning from residential to C1 with neighboring C2. And then the Fandango was grandfathered in for years to allow overnight rentals. It changed hands a few times. It was rented less frequently, but still, I'm sure somebody can get the records from the city, probably still enough to make those minimum number of nights to stay an overnight rental, and then eventually fell out of overnight rentals when Community Rebuilds bought it. It is R3, and in 2016 we were asked to vote on a rezone of the Cali-Cachita from C1 to C2. And at the time, some people proposed that the Fandango also be made C2. And at the time, and people can look at my vote, I said, no, I'm opposed to that. The owners at the time were interested in the ability to have a manager or the owner on site, and that seemed harmless enough for something in the C1 for the bed and breakfast there. But the second request that came in was for a zone change, and I couldn't see that it had been zoned in error. I thought it was put there as a buffer, so I voted against that change. And I also told people at the time who were voting for it that I was also opposed to changing the Fandango because there was always a hope. I had an attitude that we should have a no net loss on residential zoning, and there was always a hope that it might fall out of being an overnight rental and become housing again, which it has now. So now, and then needless to say, there have been other zone struggles in the community, like half a block down with the Nijoni, there was all kinds of stuff that happened trying to make it an overnight rental, and it was turned down to change from an R2. But then, there were complaints filed because there were some residents documenting overnight rentals, and so I know complaints were filed. So people have to understand that people who live in that area have some history and some reason to be concerned. And it's hard because as council members, we're always told if we're asked to vote on a zone change, we're not supposed to take into account what's being proposed because Utah has no contract zoning, so nobody can be held to what they tell you they're gonna do. And I've been on both sides of it where people tell me they're gonna do one thing and they do it, and other times when they tell me they're gonna do something and they don't do it. And at any rate, we're not supposed to do that. We're just supposed to consider, is this piece of property a good use potentially for all of these different uses on this list? So is it potentially a good use for all of these things in the C2 zone? And when I review the list, it makes me nervous because in my time, the C2 has crept in my direction, and I think that's what some of the neighbors are confused about. So when you look through the C2 list, you're like, okay, so, you know, theoretically, it could become an assembly of appliances place, or a carpentry shop, or, not that I have anything against carpentry, but, you know, an eating establishment, an appliance shop, a greenhouse. So the way we're trained in land use is we have to consider, you know, would those uses be appropriate for that location? And honestly, when I look at the list, no, I don't think probably the vast majority of them are appropriate for that lot. So that leaves personally me in a situation where I feel like what Community Rebuilds is proposing, I mean, keeps it housing, and they're willing to deed restrict for the office. The thing that makes me nervous is, will that, or could it fall out where any of these other things could happen? And I'm also worried about the narrative that I end up hearing for people who don't know the neighborhood, things in our agenda summary that say things like there have been changing uses surrounding these properties. Well, I've lived there almost 20 years. Uses haven't really changed. So I'm kind of worried, and I just want the narrative to be accurate, and I want to recognize that nobody's the bad guy here, and people are all trying to do good things regardless of the position they're holding. But some of my questions that arise from all of this are, first, I'm reading about the Planning Commission forwarding the recommendation that the City Council allow public comment. I'm not sure if that was that we have, I assume that means that we have a public hearing, but from the way it was written, I couldn't tell. I didn't see that as one of the alternate motions. So I kind of feel like if that was their recommendation, giving some of the history and just to give people time to understand, I am somewhat interested in a public hearing just to allow for that process to happen. But I also just keep asking myself, we're in the 21st century. Is there no other zoning tool that allows someone, and I don't know all my language, and I don't know if a variance is just for a line or whatever. I mean, we gave up conditional uses, and unfortunately, this is the second case we're seeing in the last year where we had an opportunity to maybe allow a use that was that has benefit for the community, but the only way we can allow it is to do a blanket zone change or to allow that use into every R3 or C2 or whatever it is. And so I guess I'm just a little bit frustrated because I feel like there should be some tool that's win-win for the community, but that doesn't open up this lot to permanent C2 uses long-term. And so I guess I'm just pleading if there's something in the toolbox or some other code that could be written. I mean, I really think that would be the optimal thing for this situation, because I feel bad for my street because I know regardless of how this vote goes, somebody's gonna end up upset. And I realize this comes with this job, but I thought that was all very important to say.
That was, thank you very much.
I think as council members, we sometimes forget that there are human beings involved and human beings that have invested their life savings and their life in it. It's not just a piece of property. When we were asked to change the zoning at the Cali-Cachita from C1 to C2, we three were very, very new counselors, and I think that some of us didn't understand the entire impact of changing a zone. We did look at it as what was going to happen on that particular piece of property. Since then, I hope that I have learned that there are other, maybe more deep-seated issues at play. And I can think of 3 in the last 4 years where we have not done the zone change. When the applicant withdrew, but that doesn't matter. I think we were leaning towards not doing it anyway. And at another meeting that I was at, somebody said, every time we mention it's for the children, we all turn into these quivering masses of jello and we just give in. And I think sometimes that's what we do with housing, because it is such a crisis. If it's going to help housing, we have to do it. And I'm not sure that that's the case. I think there might be, like Ronnie says, there might be some other tools. There might be some better tools that we can come up with. And that's just kind of where I am. I hope that I've learned that there's not always value in changing something just because somebody can make a good case for it.
It's a discretionary action on your part. So.
I'll be happy to submit a motion, but I don't know if it will pass or not, and that's fine. Or we can table it if you like, for public hearing, if you want to do that. I don't know if there's any sentiment for that as well.
I was going to ask both of you, so at your commission meeting, there was, what did that sentence mean in there? Because I wrote it down too, that, that was public comment to have time for public comment. I didn't know what the intention was.
Joel, can you actually respond to that? Because you made a decision.
Yeah, so this is a motion this is a zoning change goes through Planning Commission and it goes for recommendation. It does not go for approval. And we've heard several times tonight that the planning approved it conditioned upon you guys holding a hearing, and that's not accurate. It was recommended for approval, and they recommended you hold a public hearing associated with it. Now, if the Planning Commission had recommended that you turn this down, that's their recommendation. And when it comes to you, it's still for your vote. They're not telling you what to do. They're just giving a recommendation as to what you should do. And that was a part of that motion, was they recommended we have a public hearing associated with that as well. We took that recommendation and we balanced that with the due process rights of the applicant. The applicant is required to have a public hearing at that first Planning Commission stage. And we did that. We met their due process right, and we met the due process right of the neighbors. If we then get in a situation where we start having Planning Commission, which this is not what they were doing, but if we get in a situation where it can appear that they're dictating to you what your process will be as council, the role is reversed. You guys give them their authority, not they give you your authority. And so we wrestled with what to do with that motion as to you guys, we recommend an approval. We also recommend you have another public hearing. We felt like you guys need to tell us when your body will have a public hearing and not vice versa. So that's why we didn't hold it, was we didn't feel like that was necessarily the right role and authority for one body to play to this body.
And for what it's worth, I want to go on record in saying I was not part of that discussion.
Yeah, it was completely internal. And so I don't think any of us have issue with you guys saying at this point, we want to have a public hearing. We're directing you to have a public hearing, and we as staff would do that. We were just in this limbo position of what's our proper role in telling you guys you'll have a public hearing because you've been directed to by another body, a body which you give its authority to, and it doesn't have authority over. It just became this dichotomy of like, oh, what do we do with this? And again, like I said, if they had sent this to you with the recommendation that you decline it and you pass it, that's all it is, the recommendation. If they gave it to you now with the recommendation that you approve it, and you guys choose to not approve the zone change, that's all it is a recommendation. And so all the public hearing request was a portion of that recommendation for you to hear or not hear. So that ultimately is up to you, just like whether or not to pass this or not pass this.
And are there any creative planning tools that one can use to allow a one-time office without totally allowing offices in all of the R3? I mean, given that we've gotten rid of conditional uses and
This is a really...
You could call Community Rebuilds a school, and then they would be allowed to have an office in the residential. You could officially decide that Community Rebuilds is in fact a school, and then they could have an office.
And this is a unique...
That was actually something that I recommended, but I mean, that was...
I did see it in the list, so I wondered.
This is a really unique situation. Usually when someone's requesting a zoning change, they're saying, I need to go from A1 to A2. They're not saying, I have this parcel and I want to flop them. So normally it's the decision of what Ronnie said. If we extend this use to the zone, then we're also permitting all these other uses. I've never seen a scenario where it's like, if we choose not to do that, we're then giving all those uses that we're not permitting to be out front back into behind that. Like, so is this a good place for a restaurant? Is this a good place? Well, no, it's not. Maybe it is. But I've never been in a situation where if we then say no because we don't think it is, it then puts it back somewhere else. And so it's kind of like you're balancing whether or not that's a better use behind your house or next to your house, because you're getting it either way. It's a really unique situation. I've never seen one like this. Nora, have you?
No, but every
That's a really
rezone,
unique.
every rezone is unique.
It's
and
usually you're
individual.
deciding whether or not these new uses you want to deal with. I've never seen it where it's like, I'm getting it either way, where do I want it?
And in terms of creative solutions, Utah doesn't allow use variances. So that's not an option. A variance according to the state code is very, very specific. And you may get relief from some of the standards, but you cannot do a use
And
variance.
the irony is, the answer to your question is there a way we can, yeah, that's what conditional uses are for. But you see how great they work.
Well,
I mean,
just to-
they're inherent with flaw as well, but that's how they came about.
Just to repeat what I said, though, like, if you recognized community rebuilds as a
I guess that would be my
school,
question. What does it take to do that? I mean, aren't you guys a school?
it would be the zoning administrator, who is Nora, to say whether or not CR is a school.
If that was the direction we're going to go, and I don't know that that's a...
And then her interpretation of the code would be that schools are allowed to have offices in residential.
Yeah, and if that's the direction we're going to go, which I don't think is a bad idea, I think that we probably need to table and give us time to do the research to make that determination.
Well, then you could deny the zone change right now, too.
But then they would have to, well, that's true.
No.
But if I do that and then we determine it's not a school,
It seems better to table, I would think, so you can research it.
I would entertain that motion.
Okay.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-02, approving the zone change for community rebuilds based on the findings required by Moab Municipal Code 17.04.060. Map amendment approval criteria.
Thank you for that motion, Kalen. Is there a second?
Except I didn't hear what you said.
I move to approve the ordinance.
Is there a second?
I would move to table.
The first
there's no
motion
second, right? First
motion's
dies
still on the
for a lack of a second. Ronnie, you moved to table. Is there a second?
So, do I need to say so staff can look into the school notion?
You don't
Or
have to
other
say why you're
creative-
tabling, but I think it's, no. Is there a second?
A second.
Thanks, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Tabling passes 4-1. Moving on. 11.7, review of council member, community organizational liaison, and board assignments. It's 10 o'clock, and unless anybody's really motivated to go through this now, we can move this to our next agenda. And I'm sorry, 11.6 was not ready, so we removed it.
Can I request one thing? In this regard, Evan and I have reviewed the founding documents of the Solid Waste Special Service District, and it appears that that has to be appointed by the county council based on a recommendation given by this body. So if this body just wanted to make that recommendation, the process for me presumably could proceed.
Well, you would just continue until we do the board thing at next meeting.
Yeah, that's true.
So I would entertain a motion to table this. Or,
So moved.
thanks, Tawny. Is there a second?
I will second.
Thanks, Mike. All those in favor?
Aye. Can I just add, I got one or two clarifications just from people in the public about our list, so can I just send stuff in the interim to Joel?
yeah. And that's why, if
Yeah.
you notice there was a couple that were highlighted yellow, I know those need to go away, but I didn't want to remove anything without you guys seeing what we were removing. So that's why those,
Summer, that was all in favor.
yep, that's why those couple, Ronnie, were
Table passed
yellow, was I wanted,
5-0.
I know they need to go, but I didn't want to do,
Oh,
I
no,
didn't want
it's
to make
okay.
any changes to
Some
you guys
people
to
told
see
me
it.
like about a name change or what, I had an addition, yeah.
Well, maybe we can just
And we
turn
maybe
that,
wanna add a
let's just
couple.
turn it into a Google Doc we can all edit. Can we just do that?
Um,
Thanks.
As long as we don't start adding names and discussing why we like names, where we like names. As long as we're just adding.
We'll just
group-
add,
Yeah.
okay.
As long as we're just adding groups. that's-
11.8, appointment of the 2020 Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to reappoint Tawny as Mayor Pro Tem. 11.9, appointment of the, do I need to, is that a consent thing? It wasn't last year, but I don't want to,
You can look it up.
I would have to look up your guidelines, your rules. Hold on a sec.
I think it's
I think it's
a courtesy.
I don't know.
But it's not a requirement. I'm gonna move on. 11.9.
Let's assume it is what it was last year, and if it's different, we'll route it through as a ratify on the agenda next time. I'll check it.
11.9, appointment of the council member responsible for reviewing the city's bills in 2020. Again, Tawny, if you're comfortable continuing, then you'll do that as well. 12, approval of bills against the city of Moab. Is there a motion?
Let me talk about this for just a minute, and I promise I won't go past 10:04.
Because you're the one that says if we're not out by 10,
I know,
you're
and
leaving.
and I'm sick.
So now it's all on you.
I made a concerted effort to look through this and see what we were spending locally. I did notice that our charges to Amazon went down markedly last month. The total amount of these check registers, and these are from 12/16 to 1/8, the amount that I'll ask you to approve is $270,516.30. What we spent locally that I could tell was local. I didn't go through all of the credit card statements because I couldn't figure out what was local and what wasn't, but I'm assuming some of it was. Other than that, what we spent locally was $150,163.36. I will make the caveat that $100,000 of that was to monument waste for the pass-through. Nonetheless.
So basically, it was 100,000 and 50 of it was local.
Well, but nonetheless.
Yeah, that's still local.
150,000 out of 270 is basically supporting our local businesses in one way or the other. So I move to pay the bills in the amount of $270,516.30.
Thanks, Tawny.
Second.
Thank you, Kaylin. Any further discussion about the bills? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. Motion to adjourn?
I will so move.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Karen. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, Emily.
And monuments really local too, because that's for the payroll